I'd like to call to order the Tuesday, January 16th, 2024 City Council of East Lansing discussion only meeting. Could we have the roll call, please?
Councilmember Altman.
Here.
Councilmember Meadows.
Here.
Councilmember Watson.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Singh.
Here.
Mayor Brookover.
Here. Next item on the agenda is approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion?
So moved. Second.
Is there a second? Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes unanimously. Communication from the audience. I have two slips. Mr. McCurtis.
Good evening, everyone. My name is James McCurtis. I am the communications chair for the Lansing branch NAACP. So I'm here representing the members of the NAACP and our president, Harold A. Pope, which this letter is from him for the city council. And I passed out the letter to every one of you, so I'm not going to read the entire letter verbatim. I do want to point out some highlights of the letter. This is in regards to the appointment of the mayor pro tem position and Dana Watson not being appointed as being the city council incumbent, and given her experience with public service for the city of East Lansing, we feel like it was an injustice and a disservice for the council not to appoint Dana Watson as the mayor pro tem, given her experience. The council's decision to ignore Ms. Watson's resume screams that its commitment to diversity and inclusion only matters when it suits you. This experience illustrates how some people using government exercise their privilege, regardless of a person of color's expertise, commitment, and service. East Lansing is better than that. East Lansing is supposed to be a community of diversity, fairness, equity, and inclusion. And East Lansing was moving in that direction. But the city's progress, the city was making progress, but that recent act of not appointing Dana Watson put a halt to it, in our opinion. There were some citizens that spoke up against this a few months back. So we applaud the citizens of East Lansing who have spoken out against the new council's decision to ignore Councilwoman Dana Watson's long-standing commitment and service to the city of East Lansing. And we stand with them, and we continue to oppose the injustice the council has perpetrated by their actions. One can surmise that East Lansing city government is not welcoming of diversity or inclusion and does not wish to hear the voices of nearly 10% of those represented people of color in their city. So we are demanding that future council elections have a process in place that will honor and embrace equity and inclusion. As you have before you, the letter goes into more detail, and this letter is respectfully submitted by Harold A. Pope, President of Lansing Branch NAACP, and all the members of the NAACP, including myself. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McCurtis, and the record will show that the letter from Mr. Pope dated January 16th, 2024 will become part of the record tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for coming tonight. Dr. Drager?
Alice Drager, 621 Sunset Lane. I just want to take a moment to agree with the prior speaker. I was very glad when I saw Mayor Brookover voted for Ms. Watson, and then I was really shocked that the other three members had not. Beyond the issue of diversity, Dana has far more extensive experience than Carrie in terms of working in the city government. She worked on HRC, she worked on the Planning Commission, she's been on council for years, so I think that would have been the right choice. I'm here on two other things. The November 2nd minutes are still not approved. The OMA says you're supposed to approve minutes in the meeting after. It's now 2.5 months. Besides the statement on the second team report on the November 2nd meeting, there was a collective bargaining agreement with the police that was voted on. There was a settlement for the Country Mill suit, which is now $1 million suit. There was a settlement on the Ronkedal suit. I don't know what the legal implications are of never having approved those minutes for those things, but it seems worth your attention. So I don't know why the November 2nd minutes are still not approved. Mostly I wanted to talk about the overlay districts, and we've lived now in Oakwood and in an overlay district that was expanded to include my home starting in 2020. I want affordable rental housing in East Lansing. Unfortunately, simply removing the overlay districts I don't think is going to achieve that. I wish it would. It would be really easy then to increase affordable rental housing. Our neighborhood is full of students with a ton of money. They drive cars fancier than the rest of us, $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 cars. They are paying a lot for crappy rental housing. And as a consequence, rental houses in my neighborhood are extremely expensive to buy. They typically cost $50,000 to $100,000 more than if the house is owner-occupied restricted. And they're also very expensive to rent. Families can't afford, in most cases, to rent them. Graduate students can't afford to rent them. Our neighborhood has remained affordable for families buying houses because of the overlay. This is weird and paradoxical, but I wanted to make sure you all understood it. In our neighborhood, prices have been depressed by the overlay district. And that's been a good thing for families buying houses in our neighborhood because it makes the houses affordable in our neighborhood. The historic district probably is doing the same thing. It's depressing prices in our neighborhood. Again, I argue it's a good thing. It requires the landlords to upkeep the houses externally in a way that looks good, but it also means the houses are worth less. And that means families that otherwise can't afford to buy houses so close to downtown, in our school district, et cetera, are able to do that. Sometimes I regret that we did the strictest overlay type when we did it in 2020. It prevents, the one we have is the most strict, it prevents people from having a boarder in their home, which is crazy, because we have elderly people in our neighborhood who are widowed or widowered, and they should be able, I believe, to have a boarder come live with them who's a grad student or a young single person or whatever, who can help them with their house costs and help them with their daily living. In addition, it prevents us renting to families. The reason we did such a strict overlay is because the rental system is often gamed by parents who are installing their children and then 3 or 4 friends with them, and that causes quality of life issues for us that are quite significant in some cases. So all in all, I believe the overlay district in our neighborhood has been a good thing. It has meant we've had wonderful people be able to afford to buy the old houses in our neighborhood, to fix them up, to have the kids in our school. It's increased the diversity in our neighborhood ethnically and racially and economically. And it's given those folks a great place to live in East Lansing. I do also want to warn against any kind of thing where we allow Airbnbs, not because I think it would actually affect our quality of life that much. I think it would be the usual 6 weekends a year where our life gets driven crazy, and that already happens to me. So I don't think the Airbnb situation would change our quality of life. What we do see in college towns where Airbnb has been allowed is that it absolutely upends the housing market for rentals and makes it extremely unaffordable for most people to rent, because you can make so much money on game weekends that if you simply buy a house and make it available game weekends, graduation weekend, and move-in weekend, you can pay easily for the whole house. So those are just some thoughts to please take into account as you consider overlays in other places. Every neighborhood is not the same. The economics of every neighborhood is unique. Our neighborhood is not the same as Glencairn because we have so many students living in our neighborhood. Our houses are also older. Our houses are more delicate. We live closer together. We're a different kind of area. We're kind of the Austin of East Lansing. Our front yards often have vegetables and large bushes. So we're not
30
all the
seconds
same.
remaining.
But I hope you could take these things into account and not just assume that removing overlays will mean we suddenly have affordable housing. I wish that were true.
Thank you. Anybody else in the audience wishes to speak tonight? Anybody in the queue?
There are no callers in the queue.
Okay, we'll move along to item 4, communication from council members. Ms. Watson?
First, because it's really cold outside and school was canceled on Friday, I just wanted to thank the snow crews. The roads have appeared to be okay to me during my drives, and so just grateful for that. I know it takes work, especially when we're looking at freezing temperatures, to make sure there's not too many crashes in the city. And so next, I am going to be reading some remarks. So to my community, constituency, allies, and Black people, it's been a difficult time with this council. The very first day, their action was cited as being racist, and I was the recipient of that. As a Black woman representing Generation X, I have experienced racism on multiple levels. both in the workplace, personally, in the schools. And just a reminder that racism can happen on many levels. It can be interpersonal, personal, institutional, and structural. It's not always easy to pinpoint. But I've gathered my thoughts on the council's harm to me personally and the impression that they've left on the community. And I've been saddened and embarrassed for the community because actions like these that are left unchecked destroy the progress of the community. A few people, including myself, wondered about our sense of belonging in the city of East Lansing. As a feminist, I've also had to dig deeper to understand the differences and complexities for me being a feminist and also a Black woman, because you can't separate. I can't separate that I'm a woman from that I am a Black person. And so coming to terms with white feminism and what neutral feminism means in comparison to mine, again, has been something I've had to reflect on myself. As people have cited, some of you campaigned on institutional knowledge, and sadly that now seems like you were campaigning on something different. And you all were also coming from councils that did not have Black representation. I know that, I'm going to skip that part actually. I just want to say that folks don't need to bring me down to elevate yourself. People say, we like to say that you all have had 400 years to arrive where you are. And when were we even allowed to own a home in the city of East Lansing, let alone sit here and be elected as city council members? We never asked to take your pie. I never asked to take your pie. We asked you and the community to stop being clueless, that you have more pie and that it's not fair and that it's inequitable. We, again, like to say and be about a diverse, welcoming community that paves, and that will pave the way for better ideas. When you have a homogenous group of people, they're going to make the best decisions for themselves in that homogenous group of people. And so that's why, just especially Michigan State, in looking at our East Lansing schools and just looking around, it's important for everyone to have that sense of belonging, BIPOC as well as others. I might be the minority here, but I do represent the global majority. Racism can be covert and it can be overt. And anti-racism is an action of yours that grows from your thoughts and shows in your decision making. I want to say thank you to the mayor, city staff, you know who you are, community and constituents who did reach out, and those who also spoke up against this and saw what this council didn't. My resilience is real, and my voice and perception is here to stay. And I just hope as we go forward that together, and that you all can show the community your anti-racist stances on things. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Altman.
Thank you, Mayor. Two items on the environmental front. The first is that the city of East Lansing was part of a local consortium that won a $10 million grant under the Charging and Fueling Infrastructure Initiative of the US DOT. This was discretionary, so it was a competitive grant program. And this particular consortium was the only proposal in Michigan that won. And so it's $10 million to bring in 50 new electric vehicle chargers, which is a lot of money per charger, But there's also a significant part of the grant that's going to be spent on planning where to put the chargers in a way that will address equity issues and also penetration of EV support into communities that otherwise wouldn't see it. So it's a thoughtful initiative, and it was a thoughtful proposal. One of the creative points was that one of the members of the consortium is the Lansing School District, and the idea there was to develop vocational tracks for people to be the ones who end up maintaining the new chargers. So it's sort of an integrated approach to this grant. And I wanted to, I didn't have anything to do with this. This was in process sort of well before I got to council, but I think it's a great example of the very strong sustainability efforts that we have going on here in East Lansing. And so props to our DPW and other folks who are supporting those efforts. And then along similar lines, I wanted to mention that the Board of Water and Light, Lansing Board of Water and Light, about a week ago, announced an electrification rebate program that offers rebates for people who want to buy electric bikes, induction cooking equipment, electric forklifts, in case you're looking for an electric forklift for your backyard, and electric lawn equipment, including mowers and leaf blowers. And so we've been having conversations recently about the fact that small engines, especially the ones involved in lawn care, are a substantial source of noise and air pollution. And now you can get a $200 rebate from the Board of Water and Light if you buy an electric leaf blower. So I think this is an important development. We need to stop burning stuff sort of more broadly. And I think this is a good example of a local utility making some important progress on that front. Thank you.
Mr. Meadows?
Just one item. I just want to mention that, we had the first meeting of the Youth Commission, the very latest commission that we have created last week, and it was great. And I want to thank the members specifically for dedicating some time to provide what I thought was some pretty innovative ideas as to what they would like to do as commissioners, but also ideas about how the city of East Lansing could improve itself. And I think that was the objective in the creation of the commission, and I'm looking forward to working with them the rest of the year.
Thank you. Ms. Ebersol Singh?
Sure. I have a few updates, but I want to at least, recognize both colleagues and Mr. McCurtis's comments as it relates to the vote or after the election last year. I just want to say my door is going to continue to be open. I would be happy to come. I think we've known each other in a different life. And I do recall that, but be happy to, have dialogue and conversation, so you can maybe get to know more what I've been involved in across my career. And I know my colleagues up here know I have a door open to work on a variety of issues. And I don't have anything prepared, but I think every public comment, I leave these meetings with a lot to reflect on. And I'm going to leave that piece there for now. What I did prepare to talk about this evening was one, the MLK luncheon yesterday. It was yesterday, right? Yeah. Mayor Brookover was a part of that. I wanted to give a shout out to our very own Elaine Hardy, who chairs that MLK commission, but it was a really incredible program, and Miss Ruby Bridges and her dialogue with State Senator Sarah Anthony really shared some great thoughts. I did have a couple of quotes that I wanted to share, but they're in my phone. I didn't prepare. I did not get them in front of me. before I started talking. To read out a couple of commissions that I have been, I've been named the liaison to. One, first and foremost, the library board. Want to say that if you didn't already see, they have move forward with making an offer to their finalists. So there will be a new, hopefully, if all goes well, a new library director starting shortly. And I wanted to recognize Emily Kenny from our staff, who's been working with the library board and supporting them throughout their process. I know how grateful our chair, Amy Zagman, has, and she lifted that up to me. Also, on the University Student Commission, we had our first meeting last week. I may have shared already last week that they're looking at sustainability and transportation issues as a priority. And we do have a couple of seats that we're working to finalize representatives for. And this is where I want to give Asia, Civ, I worked on it before and I still messed it up, apologies. Civ, names are important. That you are chasing down some designees for those seats, so I commend you for that hustle and really appreciate the legwork there, and hopefully we'll have some names and nominations to come to this body for approval. Last, but certainly not least, I just am really thrilled about the strategic planning really kicking off this evening, as we're going to hear from the department directors and some of the priorities. We will have a subsequent session on Saturday where, this is something we also talked about during the campaign, and something that I articulated about becoming a world-class university community that is inclusive, multi-generational, and one that grows and thrives together. And then articulating, how do we become democracy ready? How do we protect diversity and thought expression, diversity of thought and expression? How do we pave smooth, secure access to voter registration and voting? How do we become the most climate resilient university community? How every family has a home option. Okay, that gets to affordable housing. This is my language. I'm not saying it's perfect. I'm looking at our comms director. This is my language. Sound fiscal and operational health, and then thriving culture, and that gets to our arts and green spaces. This is just rough notes that I've been working on as we kind of get ready to have a fuller discussion this evening and then into Saturday. And with that, Mayor, that is my report.
Thank you. I just want to echo Mayor Pro Tem's comments about the NAACP, or about the NAACP, the Martin Luther King event with the Martin Luther King Commission. And the only thing, I'm not going to try to interpret what Ms. Bridges said, but I just would suggest that if you have a chance to watch her component of that, which I think is going to be on the website, and kudos to Ms. Hardy for keeping everything organized yesterday, even with a whole lot of politicians talking a long time. But I just suggest that everybody might want to watch Ms. Bridges, because she's got a pretty incredible life experience. But her comments in the context of what's going on in America today, as opposed to the subspace of racial relations, are, I thought, extremely illuminating. So I would just suggest that to people. So with that, we can move on to communication from City Manager.
I do not have anything more to add from the comments already been made.
Okay. Discussion items. Item 6.1. Mr. Bellman, I'm going to assume you're going to sort of carry the ball on this discussion item. Is that a correct
Absolutely.
assumption? Okay.
So as been previously said, tonight kicks off the first part of our strategic planning process. I've invited department heads to prepare strategic priorities for 2024 and 2025. And tonight they're going to present those priorities to you and open up for any questions you may have of them. This is kind of the foundation before Saturday's strategic planning among the city council. So leading tonight's group off is City Clerk Marie Wicks.
Great. Good evening. I was actually prepared to lean on the side of brevity. The city manager has invited me to do a more thorough presentation in February. I will also be present on Saturday for the session as well. So I will sort of zip through my 3 slides, if that's okay, and then I would be happy to answer any questions you have for me. So starting off, I believe that the most appropriate category that our work falls under is good governance. Most of our work, as you know, is prescribed by law, so we don't have a lot of latitude in terms of what we dream to do. We have some stuff that we want to automate, but again, most of that is required by law. So basically, in a nutshell, we want to get through. We will have 4 elections this year. We want to get through these 4 elections with. We want to make sure that we mitigate the long lines that we have seen in past elections. We want to get through this year physically and mentally healthy, and that's a joke, but it's not. It's grueling work, and so that's something that's very important to us. Let me just backtrack too. So the elections that we have this year are obviously the presidential primary. We are 99% sure to have a May election for millage renewal for the schools. We will have an August primary, which will be for countywide, statewide, legislative offices, and then we will have the November general. So we really don't catch a break this year. The great thing is that we have the best team that I think I've ever worked with in this office. I just can't say enough about all of them. So just going through my bullet points, and I could talk all night about elections, so that's why I'm going to keep it brief. So for February, we will be implementing the 2 early voting centers as required by law. We hope and feel that those will mitigate any lines that we might see. In 2020, we saw long lines. That was really the first test of Proposal 2018-3, which codified same-day voter registration. I'm not sure what kind of lines we'll see with this primary and the dynamics that are in it, but we know students will actually be on break during really the last 5 days prior to the election. So we will start on February 17th, I believe, is the 9 days prior, is the date when we would start. We will conclude on February 25th. So we'll have the STEM building available on campus for students. We will co-locate people to register students to vote as well, because we can't assume everyone's registered to vote. So they'll be able to register and then actually vote and put their ballot through the tabulator, which I believe will be a very appealing option. We will also have early voting for off-campus folks at the house right behind City Hall. So we jokingly call that the Vote House. I believe that's 405 Grove. We will be working with our community partners, such as League of Women Voters, Voters Not Politicians, MSU Vote, and Promote the Vote, to continue to message to students to please, A, register to vote online prior to the 15-day deadline, and B, plan to vote early. That's something we are going to try and push all year long to mitigate long lines and waiting until the last minute. We are encouraging our neighbor clerks, specifically Bath Township and Meridian Townships, to contact their voters. We had a number of voters who got in line in November of 2022. By the way, I was one of the people that was there until the wee hours of the morning, who, they lived in Hannah Boulevard and they have East Lansing addresses, as do a lot of kids that live in the northern tier. And it's really heartbreaking when they get all the way to you and they've waited 4 hours and they can't vote. We made every effort to go through the line and ask people, if they were in the right place. But a better option is to make sure those clerks reach out to them, and if they wish to co-locate a satellite location on campus to serve them. I've recently met with Voters Not Politicians and the League of Women Voters. I'm going to be doing a training for them. They are always around elections, but now we are really going to put them to work with line management, triage, making sure students are where they're supposed to be. And again, this applies, really the big game is going to be in November. Well, this is going to be our trial run in February, but They will be identifiable with vests. I think I put a little picture. Mr. Bellman was game enough to put one on and take a picture. It was in the council manager a few weeks ago. So they will be identifiable as trusted sources of information, and they will help us to weed out people who should not be speaking to students. So more on that. Fast forwarding to November, I have on good information we could expect, perhaps 6,000 students that want to register to vote. My recollection in November of 2016 is that we had about 7,000, and back then we had the 30-day deadline to register. So we got a lot of them thanks to Mr. Stevens. He did a great job getting students registered, but we had to hand input all of those. So if that happened in 2016, 2020 obviously was different because of COVID. I anticipate, and we are planning for at least that number in November. Again, partnering with Promote the Vote, ACLU, other groups like that. I was on a meeting with them last week, and we talked about plans to make sure that we're targeting messaging to voting early. And we're making voting early meaningful, not handing your ballot to me at the back of IM East under a stairwell, which is where we were for a week on campus, but at an early voting center where you can put your ballot through the tabulator. So it's a meaningful experience. We will have varied hours. I would like to have a fun evening where we start voting at 6 o'clock in the evening and maybe conclude at midnight and do something fun with that. So got lots of plans. I'm keeping it brief right now, but it's definitely on the radar, and that's, again, the goal, to make sure that we don't run into long lines on Election Day. Fast forward to, I think I'm probably on slide number 3. At some point, probably 2025, given how busy this year will be, we really need to digitize records that need to be retained. I know that's on Director DeChambeau's radar and probably other departments. We are out of space. So again, it would be more efficient and easier to respond to FOIA if we have records that are stored digitally and not on paper. We certainly need to implement online business licensing. Businesses should really be able to apply online and not have to work on paper. We are going to implement shortly a vendor software program to track election inspectors that will help us with payroll, training, and so forth. Right now, we're dealing with multiple spreadsheets. It's not, it doesn't work really well for our department. It certainly doesn't work well for finance when we're trying to get everyone paid. So that is coming. And then, retention of city clerk staff. I just can't say enough about the women that are on this team. They are game for a good year. We have fun. We work hard. We're flexible with each other. We allow people to work out. That would be me in the morning. So we intend to continue to talk about that and put our mental and physical health first. Our happiness, our sense of humor, all of those things really add to our workplace. So those will remain a priority. And then the last bullet point, at some point, I wouldn't mind retiring again, but I promised my boss, Robert, who was kind enough to ask me to stay on, that I'm not going anywhere until it's time and it's right and we're ready and the right people are in the right place. So I just can't sit by the sidelines anyways in this busy election year. You would have been stuck with me one way or the other. So I appreciate the opportunity, but at some point we do need to look at that. And then while I have you, just a couple quick PSAs, and then I'll answer any questions. I did want to just remind anyone who's listening that 16 and 17-year-olds can work elections. And I thought, how nifty if they wanted to work, especially the school election that's coming up. So as long as we have one other person who's 18 years of age or more, they are more than welcome to work. They're great in my experience. They're great with technology. They've got great people skills. So you get paid, you get to be trained. So I want to open the door to that. I wanted to let residents know that ballots will be sent out if you have sent in your application for a ballot or you are on the permanent ballot list. This is the first time we have that list available. Your ballot will be in the mail. It'll hit mailboxes this weekend. And then the last thing I wanted to remind voters is if you have not returned your ballot selection form, in this election we must select either a Republican or a Democratic ballot in order to get a ballot. Please do so. If we don't hear back from people on the permanent list, we are required to contact them in a number of ways, and it's quite labor intensive. So just want to put it on the radar there that you do need to return that form. We can only send you one ballot. We can't send you two. So with that, hopefully I've been sufficiently brief and I can answer questions.
Go ahead, Mr. Meadows.
Just a couple. It looks to me like, you're already implementing a lot of this stuff, so I appreciate everything you're doing here. I would ask that you contact Asia and maybe make a presentation on 15 to 17-year-olds working the elections to the Youth Commission. Maybe we can get some of them involved. But I wanted to ask you specific questions, and maybe, I'm glad you're coming this Saturday.
Yeah.
But when you do, I do want to know about the record digitizing records, which I think actually wouldn't apply just to your department, but should apply to every department that we have. So that's clearly an element that we might want to look at in terms of strategic priorities. And the online business licensing, again, a little more detail on what we need to do to accomplish that. I like the idea of the track training pay. That seems specific to your department, and
Yes.
all of this is good government. But in the last three bullet points that you had, the health and wellness, opportunities for personal and professional growth, and providing timely employee reviews. I know that we're going to have a wage and a benefit analysis done, but those also seem to be specific to the type of strategic priorities that the council has set in the past, and they would apply to every department within city government. So I appreciate you bringing those forward.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Yes, sir.
For some strange reason, we were just talking about this question at home the other day. Do you have an assessment of how many people live with East Lansing addresses who don't live in East Lansing? I mean, you raise this as an issue because they get in line and then it's kind of tragic.
I could pull that information probably from QVF. I could sort that out. Yes, yeah, I can do that.
I'm
So-
mainly just curious, but I'm really glad that that's on your radar to try to figure out how to head that off, because it's easy enough to understand how people would fall into that, because why would they know where the exact boundaries are if they have an East Lansing address?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's a great catch.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Yes, ma'am.
A couple of things. So, and it was 200 workers is your goal is that for the fall election?
Probably more like 350.
350? And does that, I know that we're required by law for 2 early voting centers. Pending on the projections of what we think is going to be turnout, can we do more, or would you need more resources?
Thank you. That's a phenomenal question. Yes, we can do more. I've actually floated an idea by the project person, Sarah Reinhart, with the Secretary of State's office, that I know that the Secretary of State has training facilities. They have temp workers, having worked there myself. And I said, could you train a cadre of people that could just all we need them to do is register people to vote. So that's the most labor-intensive part. Issuing the ballot is not as much. So if, could you train people to, be deployed, here, maybe anywhere that they're needed, just to come in and have access to QVF and register students to vote. I want to just make a note too, before I forget, the recent laws now that allow for pre-registration of high school students will help us a lot. So the difference between a person getting in line who's not registered anywhere versus a person who, even if they're registered at home, all we have to do is pull them into our jurisdiction. When you have hundreds of people in line, that makes a difference. So a lot of things are going in our favor.
Right. I'm glad you brought that up, because I was thinking, someone who said, oh, my mom got my AV ballot, but I never got it from her. And you say, well, you could still vote if you choose to register here.
we found a lot of that in November. I'll cover that more when I do a longer presentation
Yeah.
because I have a lot to say on it, but
No,
yeah.
that's great.
Yeah.
And just a couple other questions, just because, I look at this with my workforce hat in terms of the training that needs to happen,
Yes.
and just know, as a partner, I want to be as helpful as possible, but I got a hot tip that MSU also has temporary workers that could also be a resource. I have not followed up on that, but want to share that.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
And then I'm curious in the city, and it may not make sense because Election Day may be a vacation, but is there, could there be a potential of non-essential daily that you actually have those employees report to Marie for Election Day services?
Well, I would like to mention that at Robert's very first meeting, leading managers, I put him on the spot and I said, well, what do you think about giving everybody the day off? And I'm happy to say, very game for that. So the idea would be pretty much everybody in a November general ends up helping in some fashion. So rather than leaving what you're doing, and I think a whole bunch of people here can vouch for that, dedicate City Hall just to the November election. Staff can assist, the court has offered to assist, finance is great, everyone's great. People do line management so that we know that that's going to happen, and so that we can give the people that work possibly another day off. So I'm very thankful that Robert is open to that idea, and thank you for mentioning that. That is hopefully in the works.
Great.
Anything else?
You know how November, it took a little bit for us to see the results, as in like normally we would see them sooner. Is that the new trend, do you think, or?
So thank you for that question. Yeah, so part of what happened in November is I got down there with the in-person voting results, and so those were uploaded immediately, and it would show different results, but those are not complete until they're aggregated with the absentee. So we're in a bit of a flux right now. How do I say this diplomatically? There is a thought that we are not able to transmit results right away from here. That's what we always did. So the chair people came in from the polling locations, provide the flash drive right here at Hannah, and our wonderful IT people immediately start uploading results. Eventually, all of those those memory devices have to be driven to the county. The belief now, or the requirement of the county, from the county of us, is that we have to drive all those results down there for them to upload. So we can't drive those things down until they're brought into us, which, there's work that's done after the election is over. People are closing, so yes, we have asked our lobbyist, Mr. Zagman, to get direction from the Secretary of State directly. Can we send those results ourselves? Clerks, actually, we believe that we can, or are we to drive them down? The plan in February, sorry to take so long on this question, is that 2 other jurisdictions will have deputized people from the county going directly to the precincts and taking their memory devices. I'm not a fan of that, and so I don't know who they are. I don't want people standing around saying, I need your memory device. The workers need to do their work. So I'm going with, you can come get them when they're delivered here. They don't have to go through receiving or anything like that, but when they're delivered here, you can get them and take them down to the county. So it just really is the addition of the time to drive them down to the county. So that's what we're going to try. We'll see how those other 2 jurisdictions fare versus how we fare. I want to go with this for this election, but that is a big, huge concern, because we know that late results, or results that, we know the in-person comes in first, then the AV allows for election denial people to say that the election wasn't, that it was rigged and that it was fraudulent and it wasn't, yeah. So I understand the concern. Did I capture your concern, though? Did you have another concern in addition?
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
So the answer really is what you first said, which is it's in a state of flux right now.
Yeah.
And you don't know exactly how it's going to operate in November because of the discrepancy between the instructions you get from the county clerk and and what we've done in the past. Is that an accurate representation?
That's correct, and I do want to say that Ingham County is not the only county that has gone to
I
that.
understand that. And so let me just ask you, going back to something you started off talking about. So do you have any hope that the primary election will give you any kind of a preview of that, or is that really there just aren't enough votes in that to make a difference in terms of the process of communicating the results?
I think it will. One of the things that we are able to do and going forward is pre-processing of absentee ballots. So, if we can pre-process ballots on Monday, then all we're doing is the ones that come in, we had an issue in November where a whole lot of people turned their ballot in at the very, very last minute. So that added time, and we had an issue with a scanner. So things like that can happen, but I do think that this will be a good, and the fact that we are doing something different than two other large communities in Ingham County, you can guess where they are, and we can compare notes. And we all actually met together to talk about this with the county, so we all know what we're doing, and we're going to compare notes after that. So,
Any other questions? Should we move along?
You may have bad news from the SOS that they're going to require everyone to drive results into their counties. At least as I talked to a staff person yesterday.
Yeah.
So, but you can, what I'm pushing, or I shouldn't say pushing, I'm asking whether we can do some sort of unofficial results print from the book or that you have.
my intent, barring any provision to the contrary, is that we should upload and save a result. So in November, I drove those results down. I couldn't get on 127. I had all the results in my car for the election. If some crazy person, waylaid me, or I hit a deer and I saw one on the way back, that is to me the most unsecure way of doing things. Yes, we have paper ballots, but I intend we have 2 memory devices. I think we can upload and save a report just so that we have it in case something happens, and they will have, I frankly asked either for a sheriff's deputy or to come and get those results, or for a police escort going down there. That may be necessary in November, but yeah, I think you're right, but
Yeah.
I can hope, right? We're gonna do everything we can to make it safe and make sure we have redundancy.
Yeah.
In case, Good.
Okay, can we move ahead to communications now, Mr. City Manager?
Sure.
Okay.
Carrie Sampson will present on communications.
Hello, Council. Carrie Sampson, Communications. So the 5 priorities that we have identified are, number 1, to hire a communications specialist, backfilling that position, as well as the new position of an emergency management and public safety communication coordinator. Both of those positions have been listed now, and the closing dates for both are January 21st. Number 2, one of our priorities is to meet with stakeholder groups, such as the seniors in the community, downtown businesses, neighborhood presidents, students, others, to get their feedback on the best way to communicate city news to those people, and then from there assess what's working well and enhance those efforts, pull back or eliminate on methods that we find not to be as useful. Number 3, coordinate additional media training for yourselves, as well as directors and administrators and those who frequently speak with the media. We hosted an event like that for some of the staff in December, and I think that it was beneficial and valuable training. Number 4, create a batch of, I said generic, but I would say non-time specific social media announcements, and schedule those items to run on our social media accounts on days when we don't have a press release, for example, or on the weekends, just to continue to keep those social media accounts active and engaged. And number 5 is to craft a new 1-minute video series to share information with community members. This would also increase social media traffic and engagement. And it's kind of based on the idea that there's a lot of popularity with TikTok and Instagram and Facebook Reels. People are watching things rather than reading content. So that's kind of the thought behind that.
Okay,
And,
questions?
I have a question.
Please.
I'm happy that we're hiring more communication staff, and I've told people this before. I think we had something like 9 people in communications when I was first elected, and we were broadcasting our own television shows and hosting, commentary during elections and things like that. And the budget got away from us as our revenues went down. But I would like to know from you what you feel the ideal number of individuals that you'd like to see in the communications department, because I think it is a critical element of us connecting with our population on everything that we do. And we've devolved to a situation where basically we're lucky that we have a community paper that actually communicates, because I don't think the other news sources actually pay much attention to us. And so otherwise we wouldn't be getting very much information. But do you have an idea of what you'd really like to see there? Because that can be a strategic priority to enhance our communications.
Certainly, I think this is a great start. And I think I would like to see how things work once we are fully staffed to this plan, because it is so important, because we have a large, diverse community. So.
Well, I'd like to mention also that, we do have a resolution that was passed years ago that required us to broadcast on a occasional basis every one of our board and commission meetings. In other words, we do city council whenever we meet we do the planning commission, but we also have a resolution that we passed establishing a requirement so that at least once a year, each of our board and commissions will be broadcast. Do you have any idea how much more that would cost us to actually comply with the resolution that we passed?
I would have to look into that.
And then one last question, because you have on here, some training for individuals who actually may communicate more often with the media. Do you have a sense as to whether that should be limited? In other words, there should be, say, a person in each department who is the contact, so that no matter who gets called, that person is actually the person who would communicate with the media.
That's a good question. I think that to some extent that is how things are working out right now, because people have their specific niche, and so they're the ones who are being called upon to answer those questions. But I do think that's a good consideration, and it's something to think about.
All right. Well, thank you very much for your answers. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Go ahead.
Thank you for the media training. Is that speaking and responding, like emails or, communication, or it's a media training on speaking with the media?
It's mostly speaking.
Okay. And this is new, right, for council members to be offered? Because, we've just been kind of willy-nillying it. Just kidding. We've just been kind of saying what we're not going to say to the media. My other point was, I'm excited to see us on TikTok. The governor is on TikTok, so it'll be cool if we get some more momentum going. And, that's where people are, and like you're saying about the reels, and people are looking at those short videos. So that's really cool.
Glad to hear it.
Anything else? Dr. Altman?
the idea of having sort of untimed, undated content, if there's nothing else going on, I think is terrific, because you need a steady stream of content to engage people and keep them engaged. And as soon as it lapses, people drift away. I mean, judging by how I react to stuff I read on the internet. So I think that's a great strategy. A question about disinformation and misinformation. Do we have a strategy for flagging when people say things that are incorrect and heading them off before they become memes?
So we do try to reply to things on social media when there are comments. But that is a tricky situation because of people's First Amendment rights. And so there is a webinar that I'm planning to watch very soon, so I can get a little bit more guidance on that. Because it's a tricky situation.
It is a tricky
So,
situation, because one of the choices you have to make is whether to give something more oxygen
right, exactly.
versus counteracting it. But for example, you might have somebody standing up at the podium and alleging incorrectly that the council has violated the Open Meetings Act, right? Which we've heard a couple of times now in a couple of meetings. And that's the kind of thing that if it goes unchallenged, then people think it's correct. But if you challenge it, then you're making an issue out of it. I think some more thought about how to handle those situations, I think, would be well worth the investment.
I agree.
Go ahead.
And Marie got off the hook on this, which is, one thing I'm going to be talking about Saturday too is what is our goal? So I would say to you, what is your goal that all the tactical stuff you list rolls up to? Same thing, what's your goal, Marie? What are we shooting for here? So I just wanted to, I don't know if you have an off-the-cuff answer on that, but you don't have to either, because I just kind of sprung it on you first. Everyone else, I'm going to ask probably the same thing, so.
I would say my dream would be to have everyone in the community signed up for our email newsletters and really excited about what they're reading. Actually, people coming up to me in the grocery store saying, "Hey, that was a great article. Thank you. That's really good information."
Okay. So thinking about the numbers behind each of our pieces, now I'm not saying, sometimes how I think about communication, it is in service to the departments and the strategic plan. So you are mission critical in your team, or growing team, budding team, we'll use Marie again as the example. She's got to recruit 350 election day workers. What is your communications plan to get there? What is the social media blah, blah, blah. So anyway, I just use this as a reference in terms of how I think about, and then also using that as a guidepost for those metrics and goals. So I wanted to reference that. And then I guess that would be probably the only thing, when I look at what you've laid out thus far, is just really thinking about, how this all rolls up and how we can focus metrics. But I think it's one thing that we've heard over and over again from the community, and I think Eric, Dr. Altman, that communications, and since people are hearing information differently, ensuring that we are in a robust fashion, getting after driving home the point, so folks don't say, "Oh, I didn't know, I didn't hear about that. I didn't know Scott was replacing my pipes down the street," or whatever it is.
Yes. Yeah.
All right.
I agree.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Okay, can we move along? Mr. Bellman, what did you have lined up next for tonight?
So next is diversity, equity, and inclusion and organizational culture. Unfortunately, Elaine Harding was unable to attend tonight, and she indicated that she will attend your Saturday's session and present on her goals or priorities.
And next after that?
Next is finance. And so Penny Wright also was unable to attend tonight. She gave me some talking points, so I can either extend to her to show on Saturday, or I can run through her talking points this evening.
Well, I mean, I think the council has before us the points. I don't know if you need to repeat them unless council feels like they need to be broadcast as part of the meeting, but
There's some additional points that she didn't have in her slides that she had indicated she was going to share. So again, she can either do it Saturday, or I can forward this email on to you and you can read.
what's the pleasure of the council?
I'd rather ask her the questions that I have, frankly, because they're more about where we're at and why these are on here.
Okay,
Does that answer your question?
it does. Thank you.
What's next? Do you have
Next
Ryan?
is Fire Department, and Chief Carson is here.
Good evening, City Council.
Good evening.
I'm going to try to see how many they put up there. I had 4. So the first thing that I am looking to implement with the fire department are portable ventilators on our frontline ambulances. Due to the medical facilities and needs of the community, we are finding more and more patients that need this type of transport. Right now, it ties up a third person off our trucks, which puts our trucks out of service. So implementing these devices on our rigs is going to become a priority. It'll take education, training, and implementation. However, we will probably be the first department in the metro area that has ventilators. Currently, I do not believe there's anybody that has these. My next one, under good governance, is offering a fire camp for junior high and high school girls with the goal of education and recruitment. By stats, there's only about 5% of females in the fire department in general. This will give people an opportunity to see what we do. They've already named it Camp Irons. We will work with the other fire departments within the area. And it will give the opportunity for about 20 people to experience a day in life of a firefighter paramedic, and then give them the opportunity to wear gear, climb ladders, use the jaws of life, pull hose, spray water, become CPR certified, and educate them in first aid. The next item are implementing smoke and CO detectors as an outreach program. Currently, the state of Michigan is supporting and providing smoke detectors and carbon monoxide detectors free of charge to fire departments for installation in residents. We are currently doing that now, but we're going to continue to push this. As we go out on calls, we are trying to be cognizant of houses that we go in that may lack these in the appropriate numbers. It is also being pushed out through the seniors group, and we go out and our fire inspectors are actually installing these. They are 10-year warranted smoke detectors. They're required to upkeep them. And the last one is an initiative of educating the people within the city on the ability to train and care for further AVI or high violence incidents, preparing them on how to treat and react to situations like this. And that would also be done in collaboration with the police department. And those are my initiatives.
Questions?
I just have a comment. In 2015, the council was actually trained, put through a training as to what happens if we have a violent incident within a council meeting, where to hide, how to stay alive, I guess. And I know we didn't have it for this time, but is there a training module that is available that could be provided to council at this point in time?
I believe the police was going to kind of, I'm taking one half of it. I don't want to steal their thunder. So in collaboration, we will be doing something that hits both of those.
Okay.
Sorry, Chief.
Other questions?
Yes, sir.
Dr. Waldman?
We heard last fall, we all got a questionnaire, the candidates all got a questionnaire to do with increasing call volumes for the fire department. And the trend there did not look good. So that seems like a strategic issue. Do you have thoughts about that?
Well, like everybody, more staff would certainly help. Our call volume's up about 1,000 runs relative to the last 5 years, and it will continue to increase. It would be, another initiative would be putting another ambulance in service to help buffer the number of calls. And
Is that a trend that all departments are facing?
yes, it is.
And can you just help us understand why?
Well, I wish I had the reason why more people are calling for more reasons. We still do run a pretty significant number of advance calls within the city. We obviously have a lot of independent living, assisted living, medical facilities, and that's just driving up. We're getting buildings that hold larger number of people, so we got a lot more apartments and high-rises, so the number of people is gonna increase the number of calls, but it is across the board becoming more the same of higher run volume.
If I could just follow up, I mean, the population of East Lansing hasn't really increased a whole lot, so
Age,
okay.
I mean, we're getting a lot more seniors, and that drives some of it. I'm not gonna say all of it, but we also cover Michigan State, and that drives some of our numbers, but not to a significant relative to the people within the city.
You mentioned advance. I'm not sure I know what advance calls are.
I'm sorry, so heart attack, chest pains, difficulty in breathing, calls that would require a monitor, advanced airways, drugs,
I see.
IVs.
So there could be multiple trends contributing to the increase
Yes, sir.
in the call numbers. But we don't really understand the trends all that well, so it's going to be hard to predict the trajectory.
I could put it on age, but it really varies. We had really bad weather, we didn't have a lot of calls. We can go on a really nice day and the calls come in, so it's between age, needs. I can't put my finger on what drives it. I mean, obviously, COVID drove some things.
I mean, the reason I'm sort of trying to noodle at this a little bit is that if putting a new ambulance in service, right, would make a lot of sense if we expect the trend to go up and stay high. But if we think for some reason that it's going to tail off in a few years for demographics or who knows what, then
In the last 10 years, it has consistently gone up.
so there's
Our numbers have consistently gone up for the last 10 years.
and the numbers are same for Lansing and Meridian.
I mean, I could get them from them, I can inquire of them, but it has been my understanding everybody's call volume is going up, but I could research that
Wait.
and get back to you.
You could imagine that so you've got mutual aid agreements,
Yes, we
right?
do.
And so if another department is slipping for some reason, then our call volume is going to,
Mm-hmm.
so just as, not that I need to understand this, but it sounds like we need to understand a little bit better the source of these trends
Sure,
strategically.
okay.
Thank you.
I do have a question.
Yes, sir.
Representative Slotkin yesterday was, one of the things she talked about to the group assembled was the shortage of police and fire all over the state and all over the country. And she referenced, I think, a couple of programs tied into the public schools in the metropolitan Detroit area that actually have been pretty successful in doing some sort of a cooperative arrangement with the schools, and that was actually getting kids into police, fire, community college, things like that. Is that something that, and I'm raining on the cheese parade too, but is that something that we've talked about or implemented or had any discussions with the school system on?
Not particularly with the school system. We have a program within the fire department right now. We have a cadet program. So we are pulling people that are interested in being fire and medics, that they're in school. We'll pull them in and be a cadet. We'll help get them fire trained and kind of get them in our circle. So when there is an opening, we've already had the opportunity to see them work, get them interested, kind of get them
I think
to.
we had a former cadet sitting back here for a while, but that's not high school kids.
We don't have anything,
That's-
and nobody in the area has anything right now that I'm aware
That's
of.
typically community college
Yes,
kids,
sir.
right? Okay, all right. Thanks. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
The part about the training, is that like a once a year hope or, a one time about the training for the girls, the 3-day?
Oh, my goal is yearly.
Okay, annually. And then
Yes.
is it going to be offered through Parks and Rec?
We haven't gotten that far. It's kind of, we know what we're going to do. It probably isn't. It's probably going to be all within the fire department because of the equipment and the needs, and everything's outside. But we would work with a school per se using their facilities if we needed a large area like a parking lot or such.
Okay, and can it be something that's offered at same costs to people, or is it something for City of East Lansing, 14 to 18-year-old girls?
I think we're going to open it up to like the Ingham County and larger area, but we're trying to do it at low to no cost, and we obviously would accommodate. We don't want to make cost a limit, and if it's going to be any, it would be fairly minimal for anybody to do it. We want to make it an open opportunity.
Yep, that sounds awesome. And just wanted to throw out there at Ingham County at the Health Department, we offered some run, hide, fight. And our Ingham County Sheriff's Office offered one too, which we thought was really great. And so we've collaborated with Ingham County Sheriff's Department. They'll come in hopefully annually to do the run, hide, fight. And we've also attached Stop the Bleed. And so I don't know if that's in what you meant for the injured piece of it, but just again, typically when we're safe during an active assailant situation, and we lose a person, it's because they're bleeding out. And I know that you know that, but we've also added de-escalation training. And so just throwing that out there for trying to cover all the pieces from the run, hide, fight, and also, again, de-escalation and stop the bleed campaigns. But I think that this is great, so thank you for being here.
And thank you for your information, and I will look into that.
Anything else?
A couple similar to Dr. Altman's thread on your recognizing the increase in calls. I want to give you a shout out in terms of connecting that, recognizing that number and connecting some of the strategies that you want to deploy, including that annual camp we were just talking about, as well as the smoke and carbon dioxide detectors, educational outreach. I'm curious, do we have any idea if there's numbers out there and how that would decrease, like fires?
Oh, how?
Yeah, an educational outreach program where we know everyone's fire alarms are working or smoke detectors are working.
I could probably find the stats through our fire inspector.
Yeah, I'm just
but
curious.
It's significantly, I mean, you read every day when people are hurt is because they don't hear their alarms. And at least giving people the opportunity to be notified early before anything could happen to them significantly would reduce death and injury from citizens.
And that's around the margins in terms of, 1,000% is huge. And I'm just making the assumption, as you just, you mentioned, our state as a whole is getting older. So, of course, over the last 10 years, as well as neighboring communities, everyone's kind of seeing that uptick.
Is it necessary to sort of point at me as you talk about the community getting older?
Oh.
Is that a necessary
Well,
gesture?
It isn't, actually. But the one other thing I wanted to mention is, and now I lost my train of thought. You're drawing this meeting out, sir.
Oh, yeah, blame it on I'm sure the one that's responsible for that tonight.
That's what I was going to ask. Now, I'm familiar of how, Mr. Meadows frequently talks about the comm staff. Used to be like, sorry. Used to be at 10 or 9 and is now a shell of a place. I know we talked during the campaign in terms of police officer numbers. What has your staffing gone down? I'm just not recalling over a set of period. It's been stable.
It's been
but
flat.
It's just, okay. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for working with me on that.
Anything else? You're all set, Dana? Mr. Dolman, what do you have next?
Human Resources, Emily Kenny.
Good evening.
Good
For
evening.
Human Resources, really the most important goal for us for the next 2 years is to attract and retain key talent within the organization. One of the ways that we plan on doing that is with the wage and job classification study. We're in the very early stages of that right now. The RFP closed January 5th, and we did get 4 submissions that are being reviewed, but that process will probably take the entirety of 2024, if not into 2025. Another thing that we want to do is modernize the HR technology that's used by the staff within the HR office, as well as employees and applicants. This will enhance our recruitment efforts and the employee experience when they interface with HR. Really, right now, all of our processes are paper-driven in the HR department. So it takes a lot of extra time for our staff. It makes it easier to make errors, and it's not as impressive to new employees when they come in and we sat down with them with a stack of papers to go through. So one of those systems that I think would be key is an applicant tracking system, or an ATS. Right now, if a candidate or a prospective employee wants to apply to a job at the city, they would go to our city website. They would have to fill out a paper PDF and then email it to us or mail it to us. And that alone probably discourages some candidates. Most employers have some sort of applicant tracking system that they can upload the application information from a resume, or maybe it's already in there from when they have used that same system at different employers to apply. So the ease of application could be much, much easier than what we currently have. And then also, when you have applicant tracking system, you can gather data on where these applicants are seeing your job posting and what's driving them to actually apply. So we'd be able to say, you know, oh, we're getting a lot of traction from LinkedIn, for instance, not so much from Indeed, so let's put more money into our advertisements on LinkedIn because we know that those are bringing more people to our door. And that's something we don't have the ability to do right now. And then also we'll make things easier to streamline interviews. Candidates can kind of schedule their own interviews on some of these platforms once we've entered when the hiring teams are available. It standardizes the communication via email and things like that, so it just makes everything a lot easier. And it contains all of that data within the system, all the communications that have happened, so that we can always reference it later on too. Another key technology that we could use is something that would enrich our onboarding experience for new hires. So currently, new hires come in and fill out all of their paperwork on paper forms with HR on their first day. But we could have a system that would allow them to enter a lot of things electronically. They could view initial cultural videos we maybe make about what it's like working at East Lansing, or some initial training videos and things of that nature on their first day, or even before they come for their first day. So it would just really make the experience better and more modernized for them. And then electronic benefit enrollment as well. All of our benefits are done by paper right now, which really increases the opportunity for there to be errors at times. If an employee has an address change, somebody in the Human Resources office needs to go into each benefit vendor system and change their address 5 different times. So it would just make things a lot easier if we had something electronically that could push out those changes to all of our vendors electronically. And then, you know, the employee is having a better experience of not having to wait as long for things to update either, if they have, you know, if they've had a marriage or a new baby or something like that. The next strategic priority would be the extension of leadership and development training opportunities through another system, a learning management system, an LMS. It would be nice for us to be able to offer more continued education opportunities and professional development opportunities for our staff. We really don't currently have anything that is standardized across the whole staff, and there are some holes there that I think that we could address. A learning management system would allow us to purchase training that is already prepared. It would either from that learning management system or from a third party and upload it to it, or create our own content and upload it. And then we could track who's using it. We can assign it to people. We can do a lot more than what we currently have. So ideally, we would cover topics like things about compliance, FMLA, ADA, FLSA, health and safety, things like that from the HR perspective that we think is important for management and leadership to know about. We could also have some specific leadership development courses on conflict resolution and coaching and communication and things of that nature. And then also be able to offer all staff some soft skills training that they could do. And then when we have specialized training for different departments, they could also upload that specialized training to the learning management system and track which of their employees have completed it successfully and who hasn't. And then in addition, I would like to establish a mentorship program to help new employees get acclimated to the city, and also to identify key employees for succession planning, and hopefully pair those people up with some mentors in different departments even to really get them integrated and more exposure. The last priority would be to utilize the Healthcare Task Force and Well-Being Committee. We already know that our current health vendor, McLaren, will no longer be offering coverage for groups anymore. So when we are done with our plan year, June 30th this year, we will be going with a different vendor. So it's really important that we utilize the Healthcare Task Force that we've had for many years here to make sure we're getting another good vendor that also keeps the cost down for the city and for the employees. And then we want to strengthen the Wellbeing Committee as well. We have reformed it and done some initial surveying of employees, but we want to conduct more employee engagement initiatives and employee engagement surveys through that group and find out what's really important to our employees, what's going to make them engaged, what they're looking for as far as benefits, professional development, different cultural things they want to see in the workforce, so that we can bring those to them as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Questions?
I have a question.
Mark?
Are you going to be there on Saturday by any chance?
I can be.
And if you can't be, that's fine too,
Okay.
but I'd like to know more about this learning management system, and if there's more detail that you can provide us, I'd really like to have that. I'll just say one thing about mentor training, because I've been in organizations where we've tried to use mentors. Unless the mentors are trained, they don't turn out to be very good mentors.
Yeah.
So hopefully that's part of all of this that you're proposing.
Yeah, thank you.
Questions? Zeta?
Question. Have you explored neo.gov? Like, is that an option for the city, or?
Yes, I've done more demos with them than any other HRIS systems, simply because they're really specific for public employers. And they do have kind of a suite of options that you can choose. So they do have an applicant tracking, an onboarding, an LMS, and you can kind of pick and choose what you want and bring them together. So I would like to see some additional systems as well, but they are the ones that we're the most familiar with so far, that we've looked into the most.
Okay. And we talked in the past about job descriptions being outdated. Like, have we gotten, different places with that, or?
Currently, when a new position is open, we work with the hiring manager, the director that position reports to get an updated job description, but that will also be done through the wage and job classification study as well for anything that we've missed.
And you were mentioned a couple times in Elaine Hardy's strategic planning.
Yeah.
Do you plan on, do you see yourself working with her as well, and that, being a part of it?
Yeah, a lot of the professional development, learning opportunities. Currently, we're working on some things for some new employees that have come in since we've had the cultural capacity training ended, that we can bring HR and DEI together. We haven't had a very rich onboarding experience from an HR perspective either since I've been here, so that's one of the things we're working on, is creating more of an experience for employees to come. They can maybe meet some of the other directors or the city manager and get more exposure to the city when they come in, and part of that is in partnership with DEI too.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Gary?
First, I commend you on the things that you included here, and just wanted to reference a couple of things. One being, I think the professional development, I would even say communications training can fall into professional development anytime people are being able to upskill. I think is important, and because it's a retention strategy, right? When people feel engaged and have opportunities to grow. And then Pratt, as you've heard me talk about being number driven in terms of what we're shooting for, a number of the systems that you're really frankly modernizing and just trying really create a system that has been piecemealed together, it seems like. What's the ROI? In terms of for every dollar invested, we're actually saving X. So that's just like a thought in terms of that I think would be, especially as we move forward in the budget process, like for the next go around, that we're able to consider that type of information as well.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
I do have a comment, and it's probably directed as much at the city manager, who's well aware of my concern in this regard, as it is to you. And I appreciate your list of goals, but here's what I think. I think employees have the best experience when they hire in to an entity and they have predictability about how the entity is going to work in terms of evaluation, salaries, advancement, et cetera. And I do not have the impression that the city has, in at least the recent past, done a very good job of evaluating, and right now I'm talking about non-union employees, because union employees have their own rights and systems. And so I'm extremely concerned with this set of things, because to me the primary thing that we have to do here is we have to institute a rational program or policy or set of predictable evaluations on an annual basis, methodology for evaluations, instruments for evaluations, and a fair system of evaluation in conjunction with the prior discussions we've had about written contracts and authorization for written contracts. So I would appreciate that somebody gives us some hard data for Saturday's discussion about exactly where we stand in terms of the evaluation process for non-union employees in the city of East Lansing, and what the two of you intend to do to correct that problem, if in fact it needs correcting. So that's my comment. Thank you for coming today.
Yep, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Bellman, next.
Next is Parks, Recreation, and Arts, Kathy DeChambeau.
Good evening, Council. Kathy DeChambeau, Director of Parks, Recreation, and Arts. Little disclaimer first. You might have noticed it was getting cold in here. It's getting warm again. I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor. I tried to get this moving faster.
Warm
by
is
cutting
okay with me
heat.
right now. Yeah.
I do want to say this cold weather brings out all kinds of gremlins, and we're experiencing one tonight. But we have an amazing facilities technician who was just up on the roof, and he took care of it, and now you can feel the heat again. So Carlos Barajas deserves a
Sure
shout
does.
out.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure that we give him props. He'll be very, very embarrassed that I did that. So thank you for having us here tonight. I want to go back to 2021 when I first started as the director, and our leadership staff sat down and we created our strategic priorities at that time. So if you look at narratives from the last couple of fiscal years, we've been very intentional in including our priorities and including what we've accomplished with relation to those priorities. And they can be lengthy narratives and a lot of information, but we really like to tell our story and talk about what we've been able to accomplish and show what's been difficult, what we haven't been able to accomplish. So in kind of distilling all of that information, because we still are working through many of those strategic priorities, and we purposely made many of them very broad and encompassing so that they could take us down the road for several years. We've kind of put those together. Again, this was all very staff-driven into these 4 areas. So I'll start with inclusion and belonging. And while this falls under recreation and cultural opportunities, it's also good governance. It really falls into everything that we do. And when we talk about removing barriers to participation, we're doing that in sort of lots of ways. So one of the things that we've talked about is when we're identifying and addressing barriers to participation and engagement through community outreach, we're also looking at what do we need to do to show up better for our community? What training do we need to have? So I was really happy that Councilmember Watson mentioned the de-escalation training. We actually do that through our police department. It's really important. We see a lot of community members every single day, and coming out of COVID, we know that we could see that people were showing up a little differently. We all have ways that we've changed during that time, and certainly our community still needs us to show up, and so we needed to find some strategies and some ways to make sure that we had all the tools in the toolbox to continue to serve the community. Some of the work that we've done also has been in mental health first aid training. Our staff continues to be certified. It's a 3-year certification. We've had more staff certified just this past year. We've had 2 trainings already this year. We do yearly Narcan training, and we have been working with Mid-Michigan Autism, and we are actually right now looking at a sensory inclusive certification process for training for our staff that we can pilot with our aquatic staff first. But with Mid-Michigan Autism, one of the things that has come out of that are disability-friendly swims out at the aquatic center. That's been one of our favorite things from the last couple of years. So if we want to move on to capacity building, realignment, efficiency, meeting community need, here I kind of want to pull out the idea that studying and analyzing space usage, how we do that, but also staff alignment. We spend a lot of time talking about the deficiencies in simply having bodies here, right, and open positions. But I think that we also need to look at how staff are aligned. We need to look at areas where maybe we keep doing the same thing, but we haven't really visited a particular position or a group of positions in a while, and maybe there's a much more efficient way to deliver those services, to do some realigning. And I think that that's something that it's very easy because of what we've been through over the course of the last year to get really caught up in that. We have to hire, we have to hire, we have to hire, and we do have to do some of that. And believe me, we know all the the challenges of that, especially with the sheer volume of contingent seasonal staff that we're required to hire in the course of a year. That's been very challenging coming out of COVID, and I think we're doing pretty well. We're seeing ourselves kind of getting to the top of the hill here, but I really think that we have to look at this idea of, how we align staff. Do we have some redundancies? Do we have some places where we could be a little bit more efficient to serve our community? And do we have some places where we really need to build capacity? Because I think that that's the case too. I think maybe there are some deficiencies in the capacity that we might need in a certain area. So I wanted to kind of pull that thought out of here. You're going to see in everything that we do lots of community input. It's a requirement. For projects, we're writing grants all the time. The grants that we write, almost always that community input piece is absolutely mandatory. We have to do it. One of the things that we started doing is when we're even looking at neighborhood input on a project, we have started including very specific demographic information because we think that's important. We want to understand who's giving us feedback. We also want to understand who's not giving us feedback. Who are we not hearing from? So those are some of the things that when we say, of course, we're going to do our 5-year Parks and Recreation Plan that comes up this year, so this is a perfect time to talk about that input process and how robust that is, but we're doing that on virtually every project that we do and every grant that we write. So I think that one thing I'd like to do with that, if we can catch just a minute at a time, is to sort of take those surveys and really start aggregating that demographic information and see what kind of sense we can make from it. one other thing I wanted to raise up is we're trying to learn also ways to reach out to folks that are maybe different, methods that we haven't used before. So we've talked about the anti-racist toolkit that we're implementing in our farmers market that we've been implementing over the last 2 years. That community input's really important, so we wanted to do a survey, and we actually ended up partnering with a PhD student at MSU in sustainability, and he and a couple other students really helped us to create that survey and implement that survey, and we had over 2,000 respondents to that survey, which, you know, is unheard of for a survey like that. And when he presented the results, and Carla Forrest Hewitt, our farmers market manager, presented the results to the Parks and Recreation Commission, it was just fascinating. One of the things he said is that in one of the questions, they're kind of looking at satisfaction with the farmers market, right? And he said that the satisfaction that came back was on par with what you see with like Trader Joe's. That, you know, the way people feel about Trader Joe's is very similar in that survey and the results in that survey. So it was really interesting. It was really fascinating to get that large of a group of respondents, to have help aggregating that information in a scientific way. So we need to pursue that more and do more of that kind of partnering. So that is part of that community integration, that public partner or public-private partnerships that we're looking for, and the community care that we put into that. I want to mention also that you may have seen in our latest guide of the Connect, we actually have a course being taught by MSU Extension. That's something new. We reached out to MSU Extension. We saw they have some really great programming, and we thought, well, would you want to do some of that here? Would you want to do some of that within the community? So we've actually tapped them for some training now. We've tapped them for this particular class coming up, and we have more plans for more of that. I think that's also a really great opportunity because they offer things both in person and online. And I do think that we have to be kind of expanding that and really paying attention to those folks who want some of these services, but maybe aren't showing up in person, really want to have that online, and I think we can make that happen. So finally, environmental sustainability. We're looking at stewardship from a lot of lenses here, but I think they really all go together. It's that environmental care, climate action and resiliency, land acknowledgement, resource and financial management are all part of stewardship. So we did start our stewardship master plan last year. We're not done with it yet, but we intend to finish it this year. So we have done community input on that plan, and that really dovetails nicely with our 5-year park plan this year, park and recreation plan. I wanted to mention that when we're looking at projects to do, we're always looking at, if we're going to do landscaping, it needs to be native pollinator-friendly landscaping. It needs to be low maintenance. We need to, I'll give you an example. We have submitted a Michigan Community Center grant. We haven't heard back on it yet. We think we're going to hear in the next week or so. It's been a little bit. But that was a really incredible grant because it allowed us to pair both infrastructure projects with programming. And that's kind of a rare thing for us to be able to go after. So in that grant, we said, okay, well, let's tie this into our climate resiliency. So we wrote for rooftop solar for this building, a lot of energy efficiency projects, but also programming that kind of spanned from preschool all the way through senior programming. So we had this breadth of items that we were asking for help on. And so if we do prevail on this grant, I understand it's incredibly competitive, but I think that we can tie all those things together. We even had some ADA components for the theater in there that we wanted to bring about. So I am happy to, I know I spoke very quickly, and now you're all warm again. I am very happy to answer any questions that you have.
Questions?
I've got a
Couple of things. I know I've mentioned this to the city manager, but I really think that that farmer's market presentation was spectacular.
Thank you.
And we should get that to council on a discussion-only meeting, perhaps.
Happy
And
to.
it would give some guidance in terms of how we might want to approach also the analysis of how our other projects are going as well.
Absolutely.
I just want to mention that, the Youth Commission talked a lot about the environment, and I think Asia can give you more information, but they seem to be very interested in creating an Earth Day event. We used to have that in the city of East Lansing, and it just disappeared over a period of time, which was citywide in terms of volunteers coming in, cleaning up the city and doing other events or other things during that day. So you might want to contact, we don't have a chair there yet, but we will have at the next meeting, I guess. I'd also like to, it isn't on your list, but I just want to comment that I feel that we need to reinstitute what was Project Pride, which had a different name as we went forward. I don't think it's reasonable for us to partner necessarily with the city of Lansing and having to have our residents drive 13 miles to actually clean out their garages and things like that. It was a popular event in the city. I know there's an expense associated with that, but I really think that we need to take a look at that and get that back going, and that might be part of this environmental stewardship that you have on here. I'm really very, very interested in the things that you have on here. I've got little stars next to the things that I think we do need to include for sure as part of our strategic priorities. I know that you'll carry these through whether there are strategic priorities or not, but thanks for this. This is very comprehensive and thoughtful, and I appreciate it very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Other questions?
The 2,000 respondents to that survey, they're all from East Lansing?
Yeah, they were all from this area, this vicinity. People can come to the farmers market from outside of East Lansing, so they're people who attended the market.
That's remarkable.
Yeah.
I mean, which you said, but it is
It is
absolutely
really, it is truly remarkable.
Yep.
Yeah, love to have them here for a presentation.
Yeah, I agree. The alignment that you mentioned, I think, is really important because it's a way to make lemonade out of lemons. If you're down staff, you don't just hire willy-nilly. You try to figure out what adjustments need to be made, and this is something I wonder if we should be doing it citywide, sort of across all departments. That's something I wondered last fall, but I'm glad it's happening here. You probably already know this, but faculty from MSU, if they help a local group with stuff that they're qualified to help in, which does not include me, they can put it on their CV as outreach.
Okay.
So they're benefiting from it too, which may be useful for you to know, to sort of have in your back pocket, that they're helping themselves by helping us. So that's sort of a basis for maybe tightening up the connections with them. So I'm glad that's going on. And then the last thing, in terms of sustainability, I mentioned this during my comments earlier, but there's a title of a New Yorker article by Bill McKibben from about a year ago, where the title is "In a World on Fire, Stop Burning Things." And so this sort of echoes in my head: quit burning stuff. And at a strategic level, so we're already doing a bunch of things along those lines, but what it helps me do is focus on anything that we're burning. We should ask whether we need to be burning it. And that includes that fireplace in St. Anne Plaza. It boggles my mind a little bit that that's still running. I mean, I understand that it maybe keeps some people warm, but maybe there's a more efficient way to do that that doesn't involve tossing a lot of carbon into the air. But it also extends to things like fire pits in people's backyards and interior fireplaces in people's houses. I'm not sure that people recognize how much that stinks up the street around them. It's nice for them on the inside, but it's a problem for the neighbors and it's a problem for the environment, just to be burning anything. And maybe that's an opportunity to think about sort of other outreach options and education options from the perspective of what can we do to stop burning stuff, broadly defined. And as I said earlier, a lot of what we're already doing fits under that. But maybe that's a pointer to some other things, thinking outside the box a little bit. Thank you for your
Thank you.
presentation.
Thank you.
Other questions? Dana? Carrie?
Just briefly, do we have an in-house like survey tool that we use?
So we have created one that we can use for specific neighborhood park projects and kind of tweak it for various projects, and we've included this demographic information. I don't think we have a standardized tool across the board, and that's actually a really good idea.
So I worked with a company, there's others out there, but Zen City, I worked in the census, the 2020 census effort, and as well as the vaccine deployment, especially when we were, doing a number of communication tools and trying to talk to communities of color in various places across the state, as well as they're also known, they have a law enforcement tool. It just helps make informed, transparent, and effective decisions by local government. But they got their start partnering with Harvard and their public policy school. And it's a really interesting, could be a very powerful thing across a variety of departments that you may want to take a look at, or a tool like that.
Thank you.
Anything else? Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Bellarmine, what's next?
Next one is Planning, Building, and Development Interim Director Annette Irwin. Is Heather joining you, or?
Let me just pause for a second. Do we need a break, or should we keep going? I mean, my vote is to keep going, but people need a break? Go ahead. Okay.
She's not going to age you?
I was going to say, was that my cue to be very brief? Have you met me?
Take it whatever way you want to, Ms. Irwin.
Thank you for having me here this evening. And as the city manager said, I'm here on an interim basis representing Planning, Building, and Development, which is, of course, our planning department, planning and zoning, building, our housing, economic development, and our parking division. So there's a bit there. And I'm also going to kind of preface it with a couple of things overall before I jump into the individual divisions of our large department. I think one is overarching in all of this kind of is our where we're at today with our department. We put these, I reached out to my team, of course, in putting these together quickly. Keep in mind, this is an all-new team. The planning administrator has not been with us but only a few months. I'm acting in the interim capacity while doing the housing, of course, have knowledge in that, but in the interim capacity, also only in the last few months, and trying to think forward in knowing that I'm interim. So I just want to preface it with that, in that one of the things that I do think across all of our divisions, I hope in the future, we really can work on, a lot of it's encompassed already this evening, but hiring, making it a good department to work in, to try to attract folks to come and to stay. And the other would be some succession planning. I don't think that we have been good stewards of that in our department overall. No one's fault, but just in general, it's something that at some point we really need to make a priority. And I can really see it coming down the tracks really fast. And the other is, all a part of that is hopefully being able to offer some folks a little bit more of a work-life balance. We're an interesting department in that we support a lot of boards and commissions, and the vast majority of them meet in the evening. And so our staff spends a lot of evenings here in this building and other buildings as well as their day job. So I think I wanted to just share that across all of our divisions, if I may. So clearly, you've seen the slides, and some of the things I'll just highlight. First, in the planning division of our department, of course, is staffing. There's been a lot of changes, in particular in this division, as you all probably are aware of. So we really need to get our current planning administrator some support, so it's not a one-person show, and we're working as hard as we can on that, of course. The master plan update is something we really need to make a priority, and I know that Landon is making a priority. And a part of that is being really, really mindful of reaching out to groups so that we're really sure that we're including across our community and some of the folks that maybe we don't easily hear from. And I think he's being really mindful of that as part of our work in that area. The other thing would be he had put zoning ordinance amendments, and so what does that mean? I think some of the things that we've talked about in the past off and on is kind of how do we diversify some of the things that we have here. Often we hear about housing, of course. That's not the only thing. But, you know, I'll use that as an example. What can we do to diversify what we have here already? One of the things that's been talked about in the past is accessory dwellings. Can we do something with that here in our community? Do we look at our zoning ordinance and being sure that we reach out to all of our community when we talk about these things and hear from them so that we can be sure we're being inclusive of hearing all voices? So, and the other would be anything we can do to further streamline the development approval process. Not to take anything away from anybody, of course, but what can we do so that when folks want to develop, they think of East Lansing and have a clear understanding of that process, whatever it may be. So whatever this community decides that process should be in place that makes everyone the most comfortable, how do we articulate that clearly to folks so that they're not frustrated as they go through that process? You know, any frustrations maybe they see ahead of time. The other part, one of the things that was on here I wanted to be sure and bring up is a circulator shuttle, and I wanted to just say something about it because I thought people are going to look at that and go, what? But again, our planner, you know, is thinking, and one of the things is how do we get folks through our community, and what are different ways we do that in transportation. And so this is just something, it's just a thought, but you know, we really felt that we wanted to make it a priority so that it's something that we get talking about, we can hear from people, and what can we do with that. So I just wanted to not make any plans right now, but you know, you have to start somewhere. And of course, the Coleman and West north end of town, in what we do with that property is a priority for us to get something back in front of City Council. There was a lot of discussion about this at the end of 2022. Thank you. And so, you know, at that point we had some presentations in front of council. At that time, I don't think that any of those met with great excitement, and so kind of need to go back to the drawing board on that, which will be one of our priorities. So kind of the overall in the planning division. Parking, again, one of their things, of course, was staffing, and they listed out some of the priorities they have in trying to maintain our parking garages, trying to keep them safe. It's one of our biggest priorities, and be able to continue the maintenance of those structures that we have in the city. And of course, you've seen some of the individual things here on our slide. I won't go through each one individually. Building division, some of the things that they have is, one of the things is the barrier-free survey. That is something that was done quite some time ago, and it's time for us to do the survey once again so that we can make an assessment of the improvements that have been made since that was done. We know there's been some significant improvements, you know, things with city property in particular. For example, a lot of improvements suggestions that things that we needed to do on the original survey have been taken care of really through the library improvements that have been made over the last couple of years. So it's time for us to make that a priority in the kind of the building division of that. I know you've already heard this evening about digitizing files, and we have that kind of in our corner too. I'll just say, you know, we've been doing a pretty good job, I think, of digitizing things in the last few years moving forward, but we have a lot of history on paper as far back as onion skin. Just was looking at some the other day. So, and some of it is very, very important. As this council knows, some of the projects recently that have come before you, you've wanted some historical information. So what is important to us is how do we digitize that information in a way that we can access it and understand it. That's really the key to all this. Super easy. No, I shouldn't say super easy. That's super easy. Where's Chris King from IT right now? But not so easy to digitize everything. But I would say the hard part is, and the key is how to store it in a way that is easily accessible and makes sense. And I've experienced some of this just in our own kind of trying to scan a few of our documents in history and then going back. And the person who puts it in kind of knows, but then how do you make sure that employees of the future understand that system and where to look? So I can't stress how important can't stress enough how important that is. Property maintenance code needs to be updated. We've talked about this for a long time. We were making some good strides a few years ago. Again, the city's gone through a lot of changes, and neither here nor there, but it kind of halted that work. So I know that Scott Weaver, our building administrator, has really felt that he wants to help pick up the charge on that, which I'm super appreciative of. It's not something I wanted to do in a solo vacuum way. And when you think of the property maintenance code, it's more than just rental licensing. So one of the things and why it's so important to Scott is in the administrative section is the dangerous buildings hearings, those kinds of things that really impact kind of the work he does too. So he'll be leading the charge, but we've already started a team. I know he's working with one of our housing inspectors, and they're starting to do research on that right now. Housing, one of the things in our building, I wanted to make sure that it wasn't on a slide, but I wanted to bring it up, is outreach in promoting building trades. It's something that our building official has talked about in the past. If you look at the news or education, everyone knows it's hard to get enough contractors, and it really seems to be tough to get folks in that line of business. We're not gonna be able to hold a camp like Fire Chief's gonna do. It sounds really cool. But we have partnered with other organizations that do those kinds of things. But right now I know that Scott is working with putting something together and actually working with East Lansing High School. So to see if they can just generate a little interest. So I know he wants to make that a priority so that we hopefully can help grow that trades, and it'll only help us. So our housing division, we do have a few staffing needs there also. I'm sure we'll get that underway. Along with the property maintenance code, of course, the rental licensing is housed right there too. That's chapter 1001. I think it's time, I've thought this for a couple of years now, it's time to really kind of take a look at a few things in there. I think some changes could be made. Some of them just really are to be more current with today, because a lot of that information in there is 20 years old now. So, time for a little bit of a hard look. Make sure it might be all good. Let's make sure we're all good. And then the other thing that we really need to kind of get back around to is in 2021, we did put together a near-term housing action plan, kind of stemmed out of a housing study that had been done in 2020, 2021. Rough time to do that kind of work with all that was happening in the world. But we've implemented a few, I think, easier things, near-term housing, but we really need to make a priority to pull that back out and work towards that. That does involve all of our divisions. So some of the things in our near-term housing action plan, it's not just housing division, that includes community and economic development in the planning division. So we really need to kind of work together on that, which again, maybe taking a look at this division and how we all do work together and how can we improve or maybe change some of the things we have in our division so that we're all kind of rowing in the same way there. CED, Community and Economic Development, there's quite a robust list there, I'm sure you noticed. We do want to work towards economic development incentives focusing on small businesses. Art, we've noticed a lot of you maybe have seen throughout the community, not just downtown, but art in our community. I think we want to expand art in the community beyond just downtown even more if we can. I know that if you know Wendy does a lot of our work in that way. seems to really bring out, the community gets really involved, and everyone gets kind of excited about it when they see it. So we want to do that, more of that through our businesses, some of our service providers, some merchants, to try and build some energy there. Safety downtown is a priority. Of course, we'll be working with other departments on that, including Chief's Police Department there. But one of the things is we really need to work with our community downtown and what they see as some of the concerns with safety, even beyond maybe what you think of as work the police do, but other areas that we can help. In placemaking, of course, we've done some cool things. Some of that was brought on by COVID, and I think as a team, we really think that we've got to now think beyond that a little bit. We can all go back out and be together. Hopefully it stays that way. So what else can we do beyond what we've already done? And then how maybe do we reach out with some of our regional partners and build some synergy beyond small spaces downtown? And the other part of that would be transforming some of our underutilized spaces that we see. And then how do we connect? So there's some areas where there's a lot of action downtown, and then there's other areas where you're like, ooh, not so much going on there. So we really are thinking about how, and I say we, I gotta give some shout out and credit to, and Heather is here, so if you have questions about economic development, we may pull her up here to be my partner too. But how do we really get more transformation and connecting kind of the action areas to maybe the quieter areas and drawing people back and forth? And I think it will only help everyone when it comes to economic development in our entire community. So that is as speedy as I could do.
Sure, pretty speedy. Questions, Eric?
That's a lot of the departments in under one director.
Yes.
As I don't need to tell you.
I agree.
Could you say a little bit more about near-term housing? Is that between short-term and long-term housing? Is that what that?
Near-term housing, I think, was the term at the time that we came up with as we were kind of looking at the things brought up in the housing study. So near-term was what could we do in the next, we kind of broke it down into in the next few months to a couple of years.
So it's about the strategies, it's not about the housing?
Right.
Okay. And then in terms of digitizing records so that people can find them in the future and organizing them, which is sort of related to succession planning, that seems like a really complicated problem at some level. How are you approaching that?
Yes, well, it's been a project that some of us have worked on for a couple of years now, perhaps. We've actually reached out to some other communities to see what they're doing.
Yeah.
Some of it we thought was good ideas, some of it I think we were lukewarm to. And then we're also been working with our IT department and any expertise they can lend us. At one point, we were kind of moving forward to something thinking organizationally more. We just really thought we can't just think about our department. And that's why I mentioned it tonight. I know there's lots of other departments thinking the same thing. So we probably should be looking broadly as an entire organization, and then maybe there's some niche areas for different departments as far as legal requirements and what all materials they need to access and how often. Just so happens in our department, we access a lot of history.
Yep. Every site plan, right?
Yes.
Potentially has a history.
Yes.
What about the libraries, MSU library? I mean, there's got to be some expertise there about these sorts of issues. This is the kind of thing that librarians, I imagine, think about.
Yeah.
Is that a contact that's worth making?
It is, I believe.
Okay.
We haven't in our department, and I think that's where we branch out to others to help us. It gets a little bit out of our wheelhouse and expertise, but I'm sure there's other folks in our organization that can help us with that.
And let me just interrupt you. Mr. Bellman, I suggest you might want to get involved in this, because I think maybe we're thinking this is a bigger problem than it is. I mean, big law firms have been digitizing things for 20 years and have to keep track historically of very similar kinds of things. I assume corporations have been doing the same thing. So whether it's Michigan State or other entities, I just can't believe, and I know for a fact that some of the big law firms have hired outside entities to come in and digitize everything. So I've just got to believe that science is out there someplace, so instead of us having to reinvent the wheel. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
I wanted to mess up the order.
I didn't actually know there was an order, so
There appears to be an order.
I'm just riffing is what I'm doing.
The shuttle sounded really interesting. And so is that something that could possibly be in conjunction with CATA, or would that be like a train or that little bus that City of Lansing had?
So I'll say yes, yes, and yes.
Okay, awesome. Awesome.
So this is really, really infancy stage.
Yeah, I think it sounds
Yep.
great. And people have also talked about like some of the workers downtown, where they have to park at versus where they have to get to for their jobs, and that might be helpful. And also, not for you particularly, but I think like overall, like sometimes we don't exist in a bubble. And so I wonder, what does it look like if we were to do something with City of Lansing? Like, for example, I think about Michigan Ave in that case of the shuttle. Like, what if they wanted to have their shuttle back to, and we extended it down Michigan Ave and, around the Capitol and back to East Lansing? But again, just in general, recognizing that we don't exist in a bubble. So when is it time for us sometimes to think about our other partners out there and how we can make like something even bigger by, working with them? The next thing, you heard me talk about this, and I'm just taking an opportunity to just talk about it again. We've received, some communications around a charter review. And I've also been talking about health in all policies. And health in all policies is when you look at your policies and your rules and you make sure, or you try to check to see who it impacts, who it unintentionally has impacted, who was not at the table that maybe should have been at the table, and even is it digestible? Is it something that like a layperson could read and understand and follow? And so just uplifting that in general, because that came to mind for me. And my last question is just kind of a specific question, and that is Goodfellas Bagels, which I thought was Black-owned, and they're no longer with us. And so just wondering in like a sentence or two, where did they go?
So I think Heather might have information on that. We were just talking about that not long ago, so if I could invite her up to share what she knows.
What we've been told, it had to do with health of one of the owners of Goodfellas Bagels, so they closed the East Lansing one.
Yeah, okay, all right. Because it wasn't, the bagels were banging, like they were really good. And so there is one downtown still, but just in general, like, when we talk about inclusion and supporting our businesses, sometimes we talk about the different barriers that Black-owned businesses might have, and just kind of making sure we're keeping that in mind and creating something so that maybe that there's a way for more Black-owned businesses here in the city of East Lansing as well. But I also wanted to uplift, I was invited through LinkedIn to a meeting for a Black Business Directory, and it's going to take place at a bookstore in the Lansing Mall. I think it's Social Light or Social something, but I plan on attending, and just again, like keeping my ears open for possibilities here for the city of East Lansing, but also hoping that the city of East Lansing is representative in this directory, because we are able to attract Black business owners as well. But thank you, Heather. Thanks.
Mr. Meadows, anything?
Well, I'm going to start with digitizing, because I do feel that we need to go out. I think it's very labor intensive to take these older records and then digitize them. And so I think that's what the mayor was suggesting. And I do think that we need to look at an outside organization to come in so that we can begin to really catch up. And, obviously, things that are produced right now can be digitized pretty easily within the departments. But if we're going to do these historical records, I think we would need an outside organization to do that. And that can be a part of the strategic priority that we set. And then I want to just talk very briefly about the Jolly Trolley. which we had in the city of East Lansing for a while anyway. We've given this a shot before, and it did go up and down Michigan Avenue also. And it just didn't get the ridership to keep it. But like wide ties and other things come back, and they become popular again. And I think it's worth us taking a look at this again. Yeah, the wide ties, you know. You probably have always worn the wide ties, so it doesn't really matter. But skinny ties come back too.
I thought you were talking, I thought you said wide ties. And
no, my ties.
You guys are talking about TikTok and wide ties.
Something
and
like
all
that.
I got nothing. I have no idea what you guys are talking about.
But also, you know, within sort of the area of, you know, what you made your presentation on, you know, I want to think about, I'd like us to think about the idea of, and maybe the DDA has to be involved in this, but in terms of looking to locate businesses within the downtown area who maybe have a couple of years of us underwriting a little bit of the cost, because we have high square foot cost in the downtown, to try to get them established anyway before they're sprung out. And that's, you know, within the LDFA, I think that we have the capability of doing that. You know, that's, you know, we have a smart zone, but also the LDFA can do a lot more than that. So I think we have some opportunities here to attract businesses that maybe are not located here right now by doing that. But one of the things that I'd like to have some information on Saturday on is the business spaces that the city owns. Because if memory serves me right, we own storefronts in the colorful parking garage at the very minimum. I want to know how long that lease is with, I think, Ling Brewer, so I have some idea when we can start to use these spaces again for purposes to build up our downtown. Okay. And then I'm just very pleased with all the things that are being proposed here. You know, I do think that in terms of taking a look at the zoning ordinances and things like that, that we should do that in conjunction with this update of the master plan that is coming in. And I'll note that the Planning Commission established sort of a framework. I'm not sure if that's a framework we're going to end up with, but established sort of a framework for that review that should be beginning pretty soon, and that should be a strategic priority as well.
Ms. Singh?
So one piece I wanted to reference, because I know I talked to several folks in the fall about the World Health Organization age-friendly communities, and really appreciate that you have the shuttle that was referenced earlier, but you know, this also gets into complete streets and other pieces that may touch a variety of departments, but just wanted to bring that lens verbally to the table. And then I know you referenced training in the trades, and this is where I didn't bring this up for our fire chief, but wanted to mention that I design programs from PK through career, working with educational training partners, employers. So you know, I'm here to be a resource to talk about what's being effective. So I just wanted to offer that across the board. Because at the end of the day, the earlier the better. You got to hook them early, get them interested, and spark that aptitude and passion to get them in the door. So, and then, so want to be a thought partner there. And then Mark, sorry. Okay, thank you, sir. I got to practice this. On the housing, in the housing plan, I have not looked at it. So do we have, but to my metrics, and now I'm just trying to make Marie laugh, do we have by housing, like affordable housing, by price point, how many units we would benefit from in our community?
And I need to go back and look at the housing study because it's been a couple years. And I think there was quite a bit of that information in there. So.
Okay. Because I would be very interested, back to, you know, exactly what my colleague, Mr. Meadows, reference, is that, you know, whether it's city-owned parcels or other properties that could be developed, I want to answer the question, how many housing units at what price point should we be thinking about developing on top of, you know, neighborhood, you know, art projects, and, you know, there's like so many cool things we can do, right? So would love to, you know, have a really informed, number-driven thing on housing.
Okay.
I'm done.
Okay, Mr. Altman.
One final question. The circulator, did you envision that to be a CATA thing to the extent that you're thinking?
It probably would be.
Okay.
Like I said, so I got to give credit to Landon on this. It's one of the things I know he's super interested in. And so I think he's just kind of starting looking into that. And so we'll be looking for a lot of, I think, community feedback, and certainly working with CATA and our MSU partners too.
Yeah. Mr. Meadows is correct about that. That has already been done. I'm not negative about it, but it was done. It was with CATA and the city of Lansing.
Entertainment Express.
Yeah, well, it had different names, and it went the whole length of Michigan.
Yeah, we're thinking more, we weren't envisioning, not saying you can't. There wasn't a big priority to thought to go down Michigan Avenue.
You were talking about within the city of East Lansing.
Within the city of
I
East
understand.
Lansing.
Okay, Mr. City Manager, moving on.
Thank you, Annette.
Our next department is Police Department with Chief Johnson, who apparently Chief Carson has already covered most, so should not take that long.
She did. If you don't mind, Mayor, if I can stand up here and do it, if I can cheat off the screen a little bit there. Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and council members. Kim Johnson from the Police Department. Thanks for allowing us to be here for a minute to talk a little bit about our strategic priorities. So the fire chief approached me a few weeks ago after the city manager gave us our homework assignment for tonight. And she approached me, she said, we need to be working on some tabletop exercises so we can get our staff up to speed. We have brand new staff, a lot of new people to the department, new council and things like that. And she said that we should be working on tabletop exercises. I said, that's a great idea. She said, but the fire chief said, well, I don't have enough personnel to help, but I know you guys do, so could you guys help us out with that? And I said, for sure, fire chief, no big deal. And so she came up with these two good governance when it comes to the tabletop exercises that we plan on doing. And we also going to do some active violence interventions kind of stuff with our staff and also with council and things of that nature. So it's really important. We have learned from just a recent incident in our city reference, some plans have not been utilized, some plans have not been in place, and we need to get things up to speed a little bit to get our employees comfortable with the environment, get our council people up to the environment, and our community comfortable with what they should be doing and things like that. Well, our first tabletop exercise is actually going to be part of a reception center that we've been working on for the last 2 weeks now. We have a plan now for a reception center. We didn't have one on December 28th, but we have one now. Our Deputy Chief, Jennifer Brown, she has a professional management certificate. So she's been working pretty much 40 hours a week and getting our plan up to speed. And we're pretty comfortable with it, but we want to put it to test with our tabletop exercise. We're going to be doing it in a few weeks, just to get everyone comfortable with their roles, get comfortable with what we should be doing and what resource we need to be reaching out for, and things like that. We're also going to do a weather one, and the fire chief, she really wants to, we're going to spend some time dealing with the Red Cedar area, we call it a flower pot area, where we're going to be doing a train derailment over in our fiscal year 25. That we're going to be spending some time on getting that up to speed to get our residents comfortable, getting our police officers, our fire department comfortable, and also our city staff comfortable work on tabletop, how we work, get our resources together and work together in a joint collaboration with that stuff. And so our active violence, we're going to be working with the fire department also, as the council member Watson talked about, reference making sure that we know what to do when there's an active violence situation, how we can treat the injured, where we should be dealing with, how we defend ourselves, defend the community we're living in. We also found in our situation, our shooting on February 13th last year, our downtown area, was not really, the businesses were not really prepared to dealing with lockdown situations with customers in there, with their staff in there and things like that. And so they were relying on us to help them with that. But unfortunately, we didn't have the resources to help them because we were busy on campus dealing with that situation. But we want to get them comfortable with the same kind of situation, in these kind of situations where there may be an active violence situation downtown, things of that nature. So in fiscal year 25, we plan on working with our businesses downtown and getting them up to speed, reference some things that they can do, some things we can work together on to make sure that we are on the same page when it comes to serious situations. We do plan on, the final thing we have in good governance, we're gonna be spending some time in 25 dealing with our fiscal year 25, dealing with our employees, employee health. We have 2 social workers, and we have a team. We have a peer support team that we have on board. Our own employees, we work with the fire department pretty closely with our peer support, and we're going to be working with our employees a couple of directors already mentioned that, the importance of our employee life-work balance, and we're pretty serious about that going forward. Sometimes we get a little bogged down in our calls for service and things like that, but we're trying to find ways to make sure our health for our employees are important for going to the next fiscal year. So that's one of our strategies, one of our priorities when it comes to our employee health and things of that nature. Of course, our main strategy, strategic priorities in 25, as it has been since I've been here, is dealing with our community. And the council was extremely gracious to allow us they gave us 2 additional police officers in the last budget, youth engagement officer and downtown business officer that we have been on, that's been our 24 budget. And of course, we're going to ask for a couple more officers now be in the budget presentation in the spring. But we have found that our calls for service, as in the fire department, our calls for service have also increased. But our calls for service have changed. We have been doing a great job of deciding what calls police officers need to go on, what calls other people can go on, what calls social workers can go on, what calls our neighborhood resource specialists can go on. And we're still getting calls for service, but some of these calls are being handled by our neighborhood resource specialists, handled with our social workers. And our police responses have really increased when it comes to 2-officer responses. And we are dealing with 2-officer responses a lot more than we ever have before because of some of the mental issues that some of the people who are in crisis that we have to deal with, things downtown, some of the people who are causing issues in our community. And it's a very interesting situation, like the fire chief mentioned, since COVID. It's a lot. People's patience have grown thin, and people tend to do a lot more fighting, a lot more domestics and things of that nature that we're trying to deal with. So we're sending 2 officers on a lot of our calls, and that is increasing our calls for service, and it's taking away from us to do what we want to do. We want to get with the community. We want to, spend time with the community and things like that. So of course, I asked for extra resources to help with that because right now our police officers are doing just a fantastic job. I've been asking a lot from them, and they're not necessarily real happy about it, what I'm asking from them, but they're doing a wonderful job because they got their calls for service, but they also, in their unobligated time, when there's no calls for service, I ask them to get out of their cars, go and talk to the community, go into neighborhoods, go into the businesses, to be visible, get to know our customers, get to know our community members. And sometimes it's a struggle, and we're doing the best we can. I take my hat off to the people that we employed as police officers, and they're doing everything I'm asking from them, but we can do more. And the youth engagement officer that's in this budget, we are planning on getting that posted in the near future. We had a community engagement officer and a downtown business officer, and our community engagement officer actually got promoted. He's still with us. He's doing a great job as a sergeant now. A downtown business officer, she raised her hand to want to try this position because it's downtown, dealing with the residents, dealing with the downtown businesses and things like that. And she spent about 6 months into that position, and she just said, it's just not my cup of tea. And so she went back into patrol, and it's great. And I encourage our employees to try different things. And so this youth engagement officer is going to be a brand new position that's in our current budget. We want to move forward with that position with a lot of different things. Although we're not in high school, we're not into the school system right now, but we have great opportunity to spend with our youth in our community, with our PAL, with our Hannah Community Center, our library, and a lot of different areas that we are not touching at all because we just haven't had the resources to spend the time with our youth. So the budget, the past council gave me that position, and I'm really very appreciative of that. And we're going to be going forward and getting that position posted within the next couple of weeks. And so that's going to carry us into the spring and things of that nature. And of course, the one thing that we've been spending a lot of our time on, because our resources are limited, we've been spending all of our policing on problem-oriented policing. And so with being problem-oriented policing is we identify what problems we're addressing, and then we send our resources for that. Right now, we're having some issues up in the Meijer. A lot of retail frauds and things like that are happening in Meijer. So we've changed some of our policing and trying to make sure we try and catch people who are stealing. They're really doing we're trying to address those issues instead of just taking calls for service and okay, we got another retail fraud up in Meijer. Let's just go and answer calls. Our officers, along with our neighborhood resource teams, which every department is part of, we create ways to how we can address these long-term problems. So these problem-oriented policing, we're looking at how we're going to spend more time dealing with the problems that we're trying to address. And as you can see in the slides reference, this CAR program that we have is crime analysis in residence. We have 3 employees who are civilian, who actually they spend time analyzing the crime that's going on, giving us statistics on where times of day, times of the week, days of the week, where we should be putting our resource set, and we try and do our policing that way. I think it's a great way to do policing. It's a different change for our police officers. They're not used to being told where to go. They're very comfortable doing their own thing, but our supervisors were trying to tell them, well, it's nice to drive around, but this is where the problem is at. We need to spend time on those areas. So we're educating our staff just as much as we're trying to educate ourselves when it comes to the crime analysis. So it's the program we brought on board. It was grant funded. And so we're pretty excited about what these 3 analysts are creating. And it's current employees. We didn't have to add anyone. We took some work away from them to do more crime analysis. But that's another budget question later on in the future. But they're doing a great job for us, and they're giving us great information. And that's pretty much what I just really want to talk about. The one thing that we, as you mentioned up on the slide there, our community, we're spending some time with our sororities and fraternities, but we have not reached into our some of these other areas that we need more communication with. Our partners are great, but we just haven't been having the time to get into some of our BIPOC communities, some of our other areas that we want to get into. Some of our Black Student Alliance that we had 1 rep, but it didn't work out. But there's so much outreach that we want to do, but we're just trying to find out how we balancing our employees with their time and with their calls for service. And it's a balancing act every single day. And not that we need more police officers. We don't need all these police officers because we're still down 3 police officers we're trying to hire. And as Alyssa Slockin mentioned, reference that the people are not coming into our profession and things like that. We are struggling a lot more than the fire department is struggling. Reference people coming into the field, and for various reasons. And we're doing a great job of getting people on board. Next week, I think the city manager and Councilmember Altman mentioned to me, reference maybe we can introduce our 3 new officers. We plan on bringing them into council next week to just introduce who they are, introduce Deputy Chief Jen Brown, who's on board also. We got 2 new police officers who are in the recruit school right now, and they're going to graduate in June. And even when they graduate, we're still going to be below our authorized strength of 51. So that, for me, not to be asking for the world, it's for a reason, because we're trying to make sure we get the right people in the door, but the right people have to apply first. And you mentioned tonight, a couple different council members referenced the youth in our community is a feeding ground for us to get them interested in police work or fire work and things like that. And so we have to start massaging that group much more than we can in the avenues that where we can. Like I said, Hannah Library, other avenues that we don't have to necessarily, there's youth everywhere. We don't have to necessarily be in the schools to address the youth and to be a part of their lives too in a proactive and positive manner. So that's my little spiel for tonight. Questions, please.
Any questions? Mark?
Sometime in 2015, 2016, we were provided an analysis based on national standards for policing that indicated that we were far below, 51 was far below the number of police officers that we should have for the population that we serve.
That's correct.
And so at some point on Saturday anyway, I'd like to have that information based on our current population, the number of officers, sworn officers that should be on this force. And I realize that, we butt up against a university which also has a police force.
That's
so
correct.
We have a sort of a different feel than, say, some 50,000 population city that sits out in the middle of nowhere. And so it's a little bit different than that, and I recognize that. But I would like to know what we should be targeting for.
Okay. No problem.
And because the 51 seems low. I think when I was first elected to council, we had 67 sworn officers. And
That's correct.
when I came back after the legislature, we had 43, which seemed very, way too little.
That's correct.
For the things that happen in this city. So I'd like more information on that in terms of setting strategic priorities. But I also want to, you didn't mention, but I want to talk a little bit about the relationship between the police department and the independent police commission that we have established. And you have use of force recommendations that have been made to you at this point in time. I'd like to see those rolled into, and that relationship rolled into strategic priority for the police department coming forward. And I know that based on, I've only been to one meeting at this point in time, but I had asked a question regarding the fact that about halfway through the meeting, all the police officers leave that meeting, and the new chair actually responding to another member said that they're free to stay in the audience even if they aren't at the table, answering questions. So I'd just like to encourage you to at least have some officer there to report on the things that happen after the rest of the staff leaves, okay?
We totally agree. At one point in time, we were there for the whole meeting.
Yeah, I know,
Yeah.
and that seemed to be an issue. So,
Okay.
but I think sitting in the
audience.
audience would provide, instead of getting it secondhand, you'd be getting it firsthand in terms of what went on afterwards. And that also provides that if there is a need for a resource at some point later in the meeting, then, somebody's there to answer questions,
That's a good point.
I guess. But other than that, I appreciate everything that you had in your proposals here, but I do want to emphasize that I believe that we're understaffed. Based on the things that you've described even tonight, in terms of having two officers respond, because basically we've dealt with this lower number of police officers available by going to, one person per car and that type of response. I think we need to beef this up. And maybe we don't need to go to 67, but I need a real number that we should be looking at and targeting as we go forward.
I appreciate that. It's one of these things that I was here also during the years when it was 67, and I was also running the community engagement team at the same time. And we were doing everything, and we were being extremely productive and effective. And when I came back in 2020, and we were down into the 40s. And I still believe in the community-based policing, and so my officers are feeling the brunt of my wrath of what we try to do in the community. But then they're still trying to grab their calls for service and things like that. So I take my hat off to those officers because they don't say it to my face, they say it behind my back, but they're doing everything I'm asking them to do with the limited resources. So I appreciate the support there.
Yeah, and I just should add that, we used to be like a hallmark for community policing because we had officers who were really assigned to neighborhoods to become part of that neighborhood and responding to the needs of the neighborhood and communicating that information to the command staff. Yeah. And I think that we've kind of lost that because we just don't have the manpower or person power to actually do that. Yeah. And we need to get back there. So.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Any questions? Dana, go ahead.
Okay, when you mentioned Meyer and the theft, if someone, for example, steals corn, do you all have to show up? Like, is it anytime Myers decides that they're going to prosecute or anytime they want to say, which, does that mean you guys have to show up?
Yeah, we do have to respond to a crime in progress or a crime that they witness. So we just don't, it's a call for service. So yes, we do have to respond.
Okay, no matter the amount of money.
Yeah, this says a retail fraud is occurring or has occurred, and we do respond. That's correct.
All right, thank you. I was happy to see you guys at the Waverly East Lansing High School game. East Lansing did win the basketball game. You guys were outside. I like, the separation of the police from the schools, but it was nice to see you guys outside. Okay. It was really crowded. A lot of people came through to watch that game. Waverly, I think, was number 1. It's East Lansing is number 2, and East Lansing ended up beating them. Yes, that's not true. Okay, my bad. That was from my sophomore, so that's why I put that down.
For your sophomore.
Yes.
You get the sophomore straight
She was at the game.
East Lansing was number 1.
Okay, and Waverly was number 2. Okay,
and
so
that's the truth.
we still won. So
Yes,
and
we
we
did.
won.
Yes.
Like we stayed our number 1. My bad, Trojans. So, times have changed, and we are understanding that, when you call the police to solve a problem, they're going to solve it like the police do. And so I was wondering with things like, I'm excited that like the Transportation Commission is talking about traffic calming. And so sometimes people will, say, we need more police because people are speeding. But really there's other ways to solve the problems. And so I was wondering, do you see that as like your place to weigh in on that? Or is it kind of like, you're chief of police and so the go-to is going to be, we need more police.
No, that is the farthest from the truth because we have this neighborhood resource teams and all the directors, not my directors, they're Mr. Bellman's directors, but all the directors know we participate in this neighborhood resource team and we try our best to work together. We meet every month and not all the directors meet, but a representative for each department and we talk about these issues that are always occurring. Traffic issues and things like that. We had an issue dealing with the homeless up near Meyer on the park benches, a man and woman couple up there. And we had a meeting today, and I give kudos to Homer from DPW. He's on one of our teams, and he said he went up there and talked to the bank, talked to Meyer, talked to other people to try and figure out a solution for that. And so Homer works in DPW, but he's still trying to help everyone with the same problem that we all realize it's an issue that people are calling on. So I just want to make sure Homer knows that he give him great props for that. But so yeah, we are trying every way possible to remedy the situation and not having police involved if we don't need to because we don't have the resources. So when I came back in 2020, I started reaching out to my fellow colleagues with the other directors saying we need help here because the more we can all help here, the less issue that I got to take from the police department. So we're going to all share this because it's a city issue, not a police issue. Mm-hmm. So we've been going down that path for 3 years now. And so it's a great concept. We're all about calming and this and that. And the only thing we can do is enforcement. We have some neighborhood resource specialists, we have some social workers, but I have to rely on other departments to help come up with some of these suggestions how we can get some of these matters taken care of.
Thank you. And unhoused people is also on my list, and I noticed the library isn't presenting today. Why is that, Mr. Bellman?
So the library is not a department of the city, but they are a partner. So
Okay.
neither the courts nor the library are
Okay.
presenting as a
They're
department,
presenting.
but we'll talk about how we partner with them to carry out our goals.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So I was just thinking about unhoused people, and I know we talk about it at the libraries, and we talk about the interactions that the police have. First question is, does City of Lansing have shelter spots for unhoused people? Yes, City of Lansing. Do they have little houses for unhoused people?
They have some. I mean, unhoused, as in like the rescue mission and things like that.
No. So my point is when unhoused people are getting the cops called on them because they're seeking shelter, thinking about solutions. Not that this is a police department thing, but thinking about solutions that include offering shelter. Where can people go, because they are members of our community, and we should be warm, or attempts to be warm, or they're trying to, again, shelter from the environment. And so how can we support them in that? And I thought about the library too, because I've thought about showers at the library for unhoused people, to be honest. But
That's a great point. Our social workers have been, they've been talking to some of our unhoused people and trying to find them resources and things like that. And some have taken them up on their offers too, and which is a great thing. Some people do not take them up on their offers, but we have 2 social workers, and they're very active in trying to make sure we try and meet some of those needs.
yeah, thank you.
Good, thank you.
Anything else? Eric?
I'm glad to hear that that you're going to be bringing the new hires back to council to introduce them. I'm glad that idea took hold. I think that's great. Could you say briefly, could you just explain what a tabletop exercise is for those of us who might not know what that is?
Yeah, it's basically it's like a little scenario. So the next one in a couple of weeks, we're going to have a reception center scenario where we had a situation back in end of December where we get a problem that comes on our plate, and then how do we react? And can the police handle it? Can the fire department handle it? Can the city manager handle it? And normally the tabletop exercise requires all the departments to participate. So we'll just get around the table and start talking about what we need. We should do this. Mr. Bellman needs to do this. The police department needs to do this. The fire department needs to do this. And we just start talking things through, and we start taking notes to see how we can make sure that when it does happen, we have things in place. And it's an exercise that we want to do fairly often, because like in police work, like in fire and other departments, the more repetition is important.
Yep.
You know, we have a lot of training, but repetition is critical. And not to toot my own horn or anything, but the previous fire chief and myself, the last tabletop we had for the city was back when I was here as a captain, back in 2010. And there has not been one for our department, the directors, since then, that I know of. And I could be wrong, but I don't know. But we got brand new staff, and they need to know. To know. So the more we talk about it, the more we do it every quarter, every 3 times a year. It's just repetition becomes very easy, and then when it does happen, we know what to do.
And I know that you mentioned that the next one is going to be down at Red Cedar.
That's going to be in 25. That's going to be a little bit later in the year.
Okay.
Yep.
But I'm sure the residents there will be very appreciative of that, because that's the kind of thing they've been asking for a long time. You wrote in your materials, and also I think in your Q4 update for the 2023 strategic goals, you wrote about creating a downtown business neighborhood for purposes of policing. Could you just say a little bit more about what that means? To create a neighborhood in the downtown.
It's one of my projects. Hasn't taken off yet.
Okay.
But it's really important for it. It's a great neighborhood because we got businesses and we have people living there, and visitors coming through. So how can we make that neighborhood work for everybody involved? And so we want to have some kind of dialogue, some liaison. I think Annette talked about the downtown and how important it is to us. So we need the right person to talk to our residents who live down there, talk to our business owners, talk to the students who frequent, talk to our adults who frequent the area, and just to make sure we have a neighborhood. And the more we have a neighborhood, as in like any neighborhood association, people buy into it, and people, if they buy into it, they're going to take care of them. They're going to take care of that area themselves too. And so that's what we're looking at, but we need the right person to massage that to make it work. And it takes a different kind of skill set. Every police officer is not necessarily skilled at that. They don't want to get into that. So it's sometimes a little bit of a struggle trying to get people who are interested in helping doing some of that.
it sounds like a good concept, but it also sounds like it involves more than just police.
Oh, for sure.
Right, it cuts across a bunch of different departments. Which brings me to my next question about what you call a kit. So
Yep.
when I was at the Bailey meeting before Christmas, Officer Kingsbury was there and was talking about kits. And I wonder if you could explain the kit approach to solving problems, because I think this is really interesting.
It's a great concept. I brought it back with me when I came back. It's a problem-solving kit. We call them blue kits because the kits are blue in color. It's like a little folder. And so we write the problem, and it's not every problem, but when we start getting complaints on certain issues, and we start ramping up, like the Meyer, we getting a lot of calls to Meyer for retail fraud. So we open up a kit, and we call it a kit. It's just a short lingo. So we write what's going on, and we identify 3 strategies, how we should address that. And then we take the kits to our neighborhood resource teams with other directors and other people from other departments. We talk about the kits. Okay, we got speeding on Bircham. That was been a recent one.
Yep.
Okay, we got speeding on Bircham. So what are we going to do? Well, police. Well, you know what we're going to say? Well, we're going to say we're going to need to write some tickets. Okay, that's a great answer. But then what else can we do? So then DPW would chime in, or fire would chime in, or someone else would chime in. Well, you ever thought about this? You ever thought about that? No, we never thought about that, because we're in law enforcement. So we say, what about some speed signs? Speed signs. We could buy some speed signs. So it's just ways for us to get dialogue on working together and to try and solve the problem and try and come up with long-term solutions for the same problems that keep occurring. So all of our officers know how to work the kits, and it's been lingo for us for the last 3 years. And when they say, I go work a kit, they say, where are you going to work? We go work Saginaw, we go work Harrison, or whatever, for speed. Or I'm going to go up to Maya and work that kit. Because they know, because we are there for a reason, because we are getting calls for service. So it just justifies our being somewhere, justifies what we're trying to get done, and shows our progress also. Because if we say, well, I just called 3 months ago and there's no speed on, you haven't touched the speed on Bircham. They're going, no, sorry, ma'am, this is what we had. We could document what we've done on Bircham Road since the kit had been open. Like, oh, I didn't know that. And so it just helps with justification what we're doing and give the community some transparency why we're doing certain things and things like that. So we've been very fortunate with them. A lot of our kits right now is speed related, which is a great thing. Although it may sound silly from a police chief standpoint, if I don't have to deal with speed, it's a great thing. And so we have opened up any kits of major issues. We got some large from autos, a couple of things like that, but it hasn't risen to a level of opening up a kit. So I'm pleased with what our officers are doing. They're doing a fantastic job with the resources they have.
I mean, and partly what made me think of that is the question earlier about, speeding can be addressed through enforcement or can be addressed through traffic calming, right? And it sounds like that sort of thinking outside the box fits into your kit model.
They do.
Is that sort of the goal?
That's the big goal.
Okay.
Yep.
That's great. Just wanted to echo lastly, the 3 things that I heard about in terms of policing last fall when I was talking to people were speeding in the neighborhoods, which is already on your radar from the sound of it. Loud car violations. The loud cars are driving people nuts. And I don't think in my house in Bailey I should be able to hear people drag racing on, on Saginaw or Grand River. I noticed that you've got a kit open on loud motorcycles in the downtown. So that's great. So it sounds like that's already on your radar also. And then related to that, the issue of downtown safety and the gun violence that's gone on down there. And so you probably know all about these things. I just wanted to relay to you that this is what I heard from people last fall across the city.
Yep, that's great information. And it's really interesting because we'll talk about this in the spring when we talk about budgeting, when we spend a little more time talk about some of the resources I'm going to be requesting. But it is really interesting because we're looking at our stats, and I think the mayor and the city manager asked us to look at some of our statistics downtown. And some of the numbers are strangely, not weird, but anyways, the numbers are not crazy outlandish. It's some of the stuff that we're happening in 23 or 22 was stuff that were happening in 18. Mm-hmm. And some of the levels are about the same. So which is not good because we haven't reduced some of the crime either in those years either. But the perception is just nationwide. And I just finished reading a study for the FBI, And it's nationwide when the perception of crime, everyone thinks crime is out of control. But when you drill down to the numbers, I think the mayor and city manager asked us to drill down some of our numbers. The numbers there's some of the things are up, but it's not like crazy outlandish numbers. But nationwide, people's perception of crime is out of control. And if we look at numbers, that's not necessarily the case. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Yep,
Before I get to Ms. Ebersol Singh, just as an aside, so that kid on Bircham Road, when was that opened, like 1962? Just a thought. Go ahead.
Just a thought. That was a good part. Just a thought.
So I'm going to go along a thread, similar theme, but probably said a little bit differently. You know, with what you lay out here in the document, will these strategies reduce crime?
We hope so. Yes, will it reduce crime? The main thing is this crime analysis, in residence, this CAR program, is really going to help us see where the crime's going on and how we can reduce it. And what times of the day, what they're stealing, go to the pawn shops and get ID from them and things of that nature. It can only help us. And so one of our goals, our internal goals, not necessarily strategic priority, is to reduce our Part 2 crimes, which is that kind of stuff, like 20% over the next year and a half. That's a pretty crazy goal, but you have to have goals to work on certain things. So we really hope that this crime analysis in residence and this other team, we have a team downtown right now that we call it our Peace Team. It's a collaboration between us and Michigan State University. And the other team we want to start up in the spring is we're going to call it a POP team, Problem-Oriented Policing Team. And they're going to be really centered on the kids. They're going to be in police cars dealing with speed or dealing with other stuff, larceny from autos. And that team is going to actually hit those kids much harder because our officers right now are doing those kids, but it's only doing their unobligated time because they got to take their calls for service. There's no way we cannot take our calls for service. And we pride ourselves in how we respond to our calls for service. We do a great job answering calls that people are calling us for. But when we have unobligated time, that's when we go back to the kids. So my game plan is to try and get some designated people to work those kids a little harder to address some of these issues. To hopefully the crime will go down in the future.
And are our stats it's been a while since I've looked at the data, but it's, we got by and large a lot of assaults and petty crime.
Petty crime, yes. The assaults are not, from my standpoint, they're not the way it used to be. We had a lot more assaults.
It's come down.
It's come down, yeah, because it's been different because the bar owners and the liquor license establishments, they have done a great job of what they're doing in their establishments, and we are always downtown. Come 11 o'clock, I can listen to the radio. Our police officers are always on foot between 11 and 3 every single day, and that's only we only got 4 officers working. So unfortunately, though, that leaves the city a little more vulnerable because we know there's a problem downtown. So we have to do what we have to do to keep our downtown safe. And so the assaults have gone down from the big picture of life. We've had. And we'll talk about the whole summer fights and things like that later on. But from a number standpoint, it's, they're manageable.
Okay. Anything else? Thank you, Chief. Thanks for coming.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.
Mr. City Manager, what do you have next?
Next is Prime Time, and Emily Hansen, who serves as interim co-director of the Prime Time program, is here to present.
Good evening. I am one half of the interim director team for Primetime, and I will keep it as short as possible for all of you. So looking at our annual report when we were compiling it, we found that there has been a 50% growth of membership and participation in our programming. And on top of that, a half of these participants are now non-East Lansing residents. So this shows, one, that the senior population in the area is growing very quickly, and 2, there's a change in demographics of who is using our programming that we need to account for. So looking at the programming we currently offer, we try to fit into 8 different domains that are laid out by the AARP, and that's part of livable communities, which I'll talk about later, and as planning has already mentioned. So one of those domains is volunteering, and I would say that that is one of our bigger opportunities for growth in the next year. So we currently only offer 2 different volunteering programs. One is where we bring in volunteers from the community to run a free tech lab every Friday. And then we have seniors participate in Helping Women Period, where they sew bags for menstrual products that are given out in the community later. Both of these don't have very high numbers, so we are looking at alternatives that may draw more people and just offer opportunities for people that are interested in different things. So in the greater community, we're looking at the East Lansing Public Schools, doing things like Meals on Wheels or Adopt a Grandparent programs, community gardening, which we already have a lot of participants in other communities, but bringing that closer to the Hannah Center. And then also working with other departments like the city clerk. A lot of our members and participants are very politically motivated and engaged. They're really interested in helping with the elections, which I'm sure Marie won't complain about. Even better. And then also with the library and Parks and Rec, and then increasing the publicity of our Seniors Commission and Friends Boards because they both have openings. Moving ahead, I think something that's brought up a lot is space constraints and sort of trying to handle the Hannah Center and the space there. We are starting to outgrow this space. We have a lot of demand for programming that we can't really account for anymore. And so in looking at the next year of programming, we've been really trying to focus on equity and making all of our programming available, affordable, and accessible for seniors in the community. And so one way to lower costs would be to use something like Silver Sneakers, which works with different insurances to make programs free. However, the problem is we already have more demand than we can really handle. So looking at ways to deal with this, we're looking at working with other facilities. Bertram has reached out to us, and the Willows have as well, and so we could bring programming there and work with them in that way. However, right now we're not able to do that just due to a lack of staff, so that is another thing that we're working on, and our director will be here next month. On top of that, we're working on Friday with Parks and Recreation to have space allocation meetings and start working on that and looking at how we can allocate space in the Hannah Center to increase accessibility and just increasing communication with them as well. And then finally, looking at the Livable Community Survey that was completed around 6 years ago. One of the greatest challenges to equity and accessibility in the community has been transportation. The commission has also been very vocal about this. So just trying to increase transportation so we can have all these programming opportunities and services, but also have a way for people to get to them or to bring them to them. We've reached out and worked a little bit with MSU Extension to consider doing virtual programming. However, obviously technology is a bit of a barrier for that. We're also looking, Bertram has worked with CATA in the past, so we're talking about how they achieved that, so we can look into doing that as well, or some type of increase of public transportation. We're also interested in AARP. They offer something called Safe Trip, which is an app that connects all different ride and transportation options into one app. So it lowers the technological barrier, but that's just currently, we don't have a strong enough Uber, Lyft, and bus system to have them come here, but that's something we're working on. Other than that, our main goal is just to offer programming and services that appeal to and are available to and known about by seniors all over the East Lansing area. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Ms. Singh, anything?
Is the CATA collaboration the same thing as the circulator?
No, I didn't know Landon was working on that, but I'd love to talk to him about it.
Again, really, it's a hot, exciting idea tonight, and all right.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Anything else?
No.
Dana, anything? Mark?
Yeah, actually, I want to bring an issue that wasn't mentioned here. You know, part of the budget for the senior programs comes from a legacy that was provided to us, but that legacy ends, I think, in 2030. Is that
2033, the Cochran Estate.
2033, and I think it's not too early for us to begin to plan on how we're going to deal with this. So I would like us to have a conversation about a senior millage within the city of East Lansing, because at some point we have to make, it's a substantial amount of money.
that helps this program be as successful as it is, and it's going to disappear what it ends up being a relatively short time. So that would be something I would have as a strategic priority, to at least examine it and determine what we need to do for the future on this program. As far as transportation goes, I just want to, I guess, underline how important that is, particularly with seniors. We used to, the fact that we're now having Bircham and other senior areas within the city reach out to have programming on site is a good thing for us. And, I think it will be, a positive move for us, because we have really outgrown the space there. That, that millage that put together Hannah Community Center was heavily supported by seniors within this community when it passed. And I think that we need to find some additional space for the senior program, because, as a geezer, I can say there's more geezers behind me coming up, and we're going to end up with a large proportion of our population who are taking advantage of this program.
Tie in the transportation piece too.
Pardon me?
And to a senior millage, do a part, like a transportation to help
Right.
fund with CATA.
Right,
the
and
community.
it used to be, that we would often see like the little shuttle bus from Bircham dropping people off at Hannah, and that stopped at some point in time. But we are, I think, hiring away their person as our director, so that should give us an opening over there. So.
Whatever, isn't there still a CATA dial-a-ride?
Yes, but people either don't know it exists, don't know how to access it, or it's just not accessible to them. We have 2 people that use it currently.
Okay, well, my disabled daughter used dial-a-ride for 20 years. So as far as I know, we're paying for it through the CATA millages. It's up and running. It runs into East Lansing. It takes people everywhere they want to go. So,
It's not age restricted or any other requirements?
no. It's restricted by some other things, but not age.
You mentioned that an increasing number of participants in prime time are not residents now at
Yes.
this point. So that raises a question in my mind about the defraying the costs. I mean, does that mean that East Lansing taxpayers are carrying
Right.
the cost burden?
So the way our programming costs work is, for someone that's a resident, they pay less
Okay.
for their membership to offset their
Good.
property taxes. And I
Great.
can get way more into our funding and our cost structure if you want, but I know it's late, so.
Yeah, no, that answers my question. Thanks.
Okay, anything else? Mr. City Manager, what's next?
Is the Department of Public Works, Scott House is here. He's got about 5 minutes to get through.
All right, good evening, Council. Scott House here. So starting off with enhanced transportation assets. So starting under the engineering bucket, we want to guide our investment into our assets, which are streets, sewer, water, sidewalks, trees in an integrated manner, following asset management plans, and make sure we invest limited funds wisely to extend service life and reduce risk. And that's an enduring thing, and that's just the smart way to spend money. Second, we want to elevate the non-motorized plan to a mobility plan. We want to incorporate the input of neighborhood traffic, speeding, possibly senior transportation and other assets, and Lincoln and CATA possibly. How do we look at transportation in a more elevated fashion and general mobility? And linking sidewalks to bus stops, bike lanes, making sure they connect, making sure bike lanes are in the right place, and where could we have new pathways, corridors, and all that good stuff. Then we want to tell our story better. We want to communicate better, more timely, more effectively, so people understand what we're doing and why we're doing it, and expand the mediums. Maybe our website's not the best way. Maybe we have to get out further in person, beyond the door tags, but we just want to change how we're doing that, work with communications, work with the team on how we do that. And last, under this bucket for engineering, we want to continue to look for the money. We want to be at the table when money is being considered, and we want to be considered. And then under operations, we have a aggressive goal of replacing all lead service lines by 2027. We'll talk later about this. We might have upwards to 400, and that'll be a challenge, but I'll go in later for that. The next, we want to align our staffing to our goals and what staffing levels we need to achieve the goals in the asset management plans. We want council to say this is the level of service we want, this is going to be the staffing and resources where we will be required to meet that and to meet those goals of our other departments that we support. Continuing under enhanced transportation and infrastructure at the WRF, Water Resource Recovery Facility, we want to complete the renewal of the original infrastructure there and to implement and provide equitable facilities are efficient and great to work at. Now, it's tough to be at a wastewater plant. It's by its nature a tough environment, but the facility there, the administrative and lab building was constructed in the 60s. The women's restroom is in the basement. It's not a very inviting place. We want to build new restroom facilities, upgrade the areas for the employees out there to receive training, to work at, and just improve the general environment. But also, many of those systems have reached the end of their service life. They need to be renewed, and we have additional work out there to complete the total reconstruction of that. We've made great progress. We're on the home stretch here. Next there, we want to optimize it. We basically built a whole new facility, and we're learning lessons. We need to make it more efficient. We need to look at how we staff it. And this is going to take a couple of years to realize these gains and how we should do this to set the standard going forward in the future. And the WRF right now, I would say 10 years ago, was an embarrassment. Right now, we're leading in Michigan of what we're doing. So, and that's due in large to the support of council. And then we need to increase the resilience. We want to be able to survive heavy storms, power losses, high water flow events, so we don't release discharge to the river. Good news is, before we put the combined heat power unit out there, we're using roughly 1,400 kilowatts a day. And through efficiencies and consuming biogas, we're buying 200 kilowatts a day. That's a big deal. We might be able to invest further in a generator and become an island and sell power back to the Board of Water and Light. There's opportunities there that we'll explore. Then under GIS and asset management, we want to sustain and enhance our systems and make sure that they're integrated and easy to use. There's nothing worse than have a database that's cumbersome that we cannot use internally or our stakeholders can use. We want to make it nimble. We want to make it relevant and accessible. And then under the admin team, we have a lot of people calling us day in and day out. We want to make sure we capture that input already. We want to capture it better to the assets so we can better see trends. We strive for that now, but we want to make sure we identify trends up front. We can see where their issues are and make sure we are reacting or responding in the correct way. And then we want to upgrade our water meters so that we can bill monthly for water and sewer, and that if people have a leak or a running toilet, they'll get a text that says, hey, your water's running, check something. That'd be a big investment. It would also improve our revenue. Turning next to environmental sustainability. Our recycling is great. We're leaders in the region, but it's flatlining. We want to reach more people. We want to increase participation. We want to get more people recycling. And that's constant contact, engaging different people. Every year we have new students and new population of students moving in. We have to reach out to them. But can we expand to more multifamily areas? Can we expand to more businesses? How people are paying this millage? How can we provide the service and make it easy that we can provide them service curbside? Next, we have just shy of 10,000 trees, city trees. That's a tremendous asset. And either we can maintain them or react to them in a storm. Our goal is to maintain them, to make them an asset, to extend their service life, and decrease the consequences of severe weather on them, and ensure that when they die or they fall down in a storm, that we replace them, that we maintain a healthy canopy. Next one is establish a stormwater utility. So we have a high water infrastructure grant going on to study the effects of our sewer system and severe rain events. On any given day, our sanitary sewer system works great. Our challenge is when it's raining. Now, the challenge is how do you fund that? And ideally, stormwater. We have a stormwater conveyance problem. Most urban communities in Michigan face this problem. A stormwater utility would allow us to invest in that infrastructure, to allocate resources to that, and they would thereby reduce runoff scenarios, but there's some legacy scenarios there that are not. Would incentivize MDOT to pull to separate stormwater from our combined sewers on the trunk lines. There'd be a lot of good from that, but that's not an easy thing. There's been challenges on that. Next, we want to I consider reducing our carbon footprint through alternative energy sources and efficient upgrades. We're talking about solar at DPW, we're talking about geothermal, we're talking about efficiencies at the WRF. We want to partner with Kathy and her team. In general, how can we do these things, do them on scale, so we reduce our carbon footprint? And it's just not going to be solar. There's going to be a variety of improvements. And sometimes we have to spend money to save money and make those business cases for the ROI. And last one, environment on this page is want to maintain compliance of our programs. We've been entrusted to have municipal stormwater system programs and soil erosion programs. We want to make sure we're doing them right and that we provide those services within standard with EGLE. Going on to the next page for environmental sustainability for fleet. And we want to optimize our fleet operations, balancing cost, emissions, and flexibility. So we have 120 vehicles, we have 82 pieces of equipment. Every time we seek to strive to comply with the green fleet policy. Our challenge is, certain pieces of equipment just don't do that, but we try to buy equipment that's multi-use so we can reduce the footprint of the fleet. But we're also looking forward at what can we do next? What is the emerging technology? And that goes to, we want to set conditions for zero emission vehicles. Now, the vehicles we need to do the heavy lifting might not be electric. They might be hydrogen. But we need to invest in our workforce. We need to invest in the infrastructure to be able to support it. Electric cars are easy to support, but domestic use electric car for personal use is different from a police cruiser that needs to be able to go sustained at any moment and for sustained amounts of time, or a plow truck that's going to be on the road for 96 hours during a large storm with multiple operators. Then our operations for sustainability, we want to look at how do we reduce the impact on the environment from our operations. Can we use less salt? Can we mow less? Can we reduce the fleet size by having common use equipment? Can we be smarter about how we do things and when we do them? And the best way to reduce cost in an operations standpoint is to extend service life of infrastructure. If I can make something last longer, that's going to be lower carbon footprint from repaving a street and things like that. And we look at holistically the impacts of things. And a novel one too is we're seeking a regional compost processing facility and storm damage laydown. So the reason we say that is it'd be nice to be able to compost our street leaves, the leaves we collect curbside, and partner with Lansing, because there's a need there, and there could be an aftermarket for it. But during severe weather, there's a ton of storm damage debris. And when we have these big storm events, there's often it's tough. Where do people take their material? Where it can be processed, ground, or if it's a FEMA eligible event, to set up the conditions where you could do recovery and have yard layout and just have those protocols in place. And the next one for good governance under admin, a lot of this has been hit on, but we want to implement an onboarding system to build culture and safety policy and acculturation. Our challenge is and frankly, we're facing an environment where we're not going to have employees for life. They're going to be turning over. We need to onboard people, and we need to make sure if they're coming to DPW, they understand what confined space is, what the hazards are of working around a trench, what lockout tagout is, what hazardous communication is. We need to make sure they understand what the expectations are and acculturate them how we do things, and make that easy to bring people on in a deliberate fashion and to get them up to speed, because bringing on new employees is tough. And getting them up to speed so they can do something safely and effectively takes time. If we build the system, we want to lower that time to where people add value, and that's at all levels of the organization. And then from GIS and asset management, we want to enhance our public-facing options for permitting and just make it easier for people to interface with us. Maybe you can work with us online, and this, we want to follow Building's lead on this and make things easier for customers to come to us and make it more transparent for them. Because right now, permitting through us is tough and through a lot of agencies. We want to make that easier. Subject to your questions, that's what we have for that.
Ms. Singh, anything?
Not top of mind, and a little late.
Yeah, just a few questions. When you mentioned the leaves and so my question is, when you think about leaving the leaves, or when we talk about leaving the leaves, is it possible that there's some areas where we could help people do it right, and or that there's places that people could more easily leave their leaves? Because I understood that there was an issue because of the sewer systems. We don't want the leaves, piling up in there.
And that's a good question. So our concern about our leaves on the street. If people want to keep their yard covered in leaves, they're more than free to. It's just when we have big piles of leaves in the street, they clog up the catch basins or they get in the sewer. If they clog up the catch basin like this winter event we had, and we get a bunch of water in the road, it freezes, and those are the hazards we're trying to mitigate. Or they're on the street and we plow, and that sends them everywhere. So we just want our sewer system working.
Absolutely.
And the tough one is there's different people have different ideas of how they want their yard, but there's nothing that prevents people from leaving the leaves on their yard.
Thank you. And my other question, are you our last presenter? I think you are.
We have one more thing if we have the energy to lead in copper.
Well, yeah, but you're the last presenter in this thing.
Oh, yeah, we have one more topic. Okay, yeah. Okay. So I'm noticing that the DEI plan involves other departments,
Yes.
for example, like the DEI training. And so are you able, as one of the leaders for your division, to support that and to ask your employees or tell your employees to go to these DI trainings and why it's important and why it's a value for our community?
Yeah, we're definitely able to partner with that. The big one, I think the opportunity is definitely on onboarding, and we have to be sensitive to, we are very seasonally dependent and driven by consequences of events as well.
Yeah.
So that's a tough one, and how to balance in training and operations as well.
Thank you.
Mr. Meadows?
Well, this is more of a comment. You mentioned grants that you would be seeking, and I think Parks and Recreation had that as one of the items that they were talking about as well. And I'm just wondering whether, when we talk on Saturday, maybe we could get some information as to whether it might make sense for us to have a grant officer on board that deals with all of our departments and is specific to assisting in getting those. Also, I wanted to ask you the question, when we started the franchise agreement with Border Water and Light, Dick came into my office one day and just said, we're giving you the best deal in terms of pricing for purchasing power for the city. And I want to make sure that we're still getting the best deal from them. I think it was wholesale pricing at that point in time. And I know that they offer theory. I think it's basically a theory, because I don't know how they would monitor this, but they offer an opportunity to purchase just renewable energy from them. Have we looked at the price of that compared to what we're paying right now? Because that would be one way for us to go forward and support renewable energy within our community.
So we haven't looked at that at DPW or at the WRF necessarily, because we had $1 million electric bill that we keep on trying to trim down. I know that was discussed, and the board, I could say, is just, they're a great partner. And some of the challenges even at the WRF though is, we're creating a conundrum for them. Because what happens if the generator goes down and all of a sudden we need 700 kilowatts? So they're coming up with new standby rates for us. Okay. And we're trying to determine, we're trying to see what that looks like, what's the cost implication, because we thought we were saving money, but then we have to be able to pay for those standby rates. So I'm actually contemplating reaching out to Doug Jester, who's the city's board rep on that policy, to get his insight.
Yeah, and then also, it seems like we approved installation of solar back when Eric and I were on the council at that location, and I'm a little surprised that we haven't moved forward on that. Is there a particular reason
I mean, did we have trouble with Board of Water and Light in terms of that installation, or what was the issue?
I think they're looking at funding and options, and then, so right now, the best time exists because the tax credits and just the cost and the bandwidth of staff. And then we were discussing doing it by ARPA, and so our goal now is to get an RFP out for solar at DPW to provide resilience at that facility with the capability to sell back to the grid. Under the same RFP, look at geothermal for DPW as well, because we have the land mass as well. And anything else we can do to reduce our carbon footprint at the facility.
All right, I'd like to see that as part of the strategic priorities that we take a look at on Saturday as well.
Eric? The purchasing renewable energy from BWL, that's something else to talk to Doug Jester about, because I think he has distinct views on whether that's an appropriate way to spend our money. I don't think he thinks it is, but I don't want to speak for him. In terms of chasing grant money, we talked about hiring a new grant writer.
Yes, sir.
Right? And sounds like that's probably still in the works.
It is. I've also got it proposed for staffing in '25 budget.
Great. In terms of communications, there's a lot of great stuff going on in DPW. I mean, there's a lot of great stuff going on throughout the city, but a lot of these projects, like these grants that you guys are chasing and getting, and it occurred to me when communications was talking, when Carrie was talking, they need content, and there's content. There's great stuff we should be talking about, and pushing that out on a regular basis so that people get engaged and also get engaged with the outlet, but also learn about what's going on, I think would be a great idea. You talked about the idea of a plow truck being on the road for 96 hours, and sort of you have to be able to refill it quickly. You can't recharge it. I have to believe that the savings from powering pieces of equipment like that, the savings from powering them electrically and the maintenance, could justify having more of them around. Is that, I mean, you've probably worked through that, but could you address that just briefly?
So our plow truck right now probably costs $270,000. And to get an electric equivalent with all the same features would be very tough. That's why I think some of the large vehicles, it might come down to a different fuel. It might come down to hydrogen or other aspects of that. The challenges for municipal electrically powered equipment is, one, the charging infrastructure having, because you use it during the day, then you have to have someone charge it at night. And do you have sufficient charging technology? And it would be okay for an administrative fleet, and we're considering that for 25, but we need to balance the charging infrastructure, but it's just the large scale adoption. And as technology evolves for the larger equipment, therein lies, it might go a different direction.
So there's a benefit to waiting to see where things go.
Yeah. But we want to get our feet wet with a couple EVs just to understand what that looks like. We are upgrading our hoists in the garage because EVs are heavier. They can be wider in certain aspects, and looking at staff training, because it's going to be instead of a gasoline-powered explosive hazard, it's going to be a lithium-ion battery hazard and different things like that.
The composting idea, was this basically to have like a public, would the idea be to have a public drop-off?
That could be an aspect of that. But if it were an intergovernmental agreement to have a yard where it was operated and bring organic debris generated from both communities and processed and sold for mulch or for topsoil, and also as a wood laydown yard, Ann Arbor, Grand Rapids, these areas tend to have something like this. There are some private entities that fill this to a certain extent, but we might have more flexibility to do something intergovernmentally as well.
That was actually a suggestion I got from a resident. He wanted to see it. It was the only person who raised that issue, but I did write it down, and it came to mind when you were talking about that. I'll say what I said earlier when Kathy was talking. Stop burning stuff, right? That's already factored in, but just wanted to repeat that. We need a plan to bury utilities. I realize that's a moonshot. That's a 20-year project, at least. But if we don't start thinking about it, then it's not going to happen, and we need to do it.
And I think the big challenge with that is who would bear the cost? Would we add that to the electric rates, talk to the board? And those could be discussions with them. What would be the rate impact? Because they would be the ones doing that as part of their system.
I think in terms of communication and buy-in, if we have to have a millage, right, to replace our sidewalks and bury utilities underneath our sidewalks, just brainstorming here. I think you could sell people on the idea that they wouldn't have to look at the junk in their backyard anymore. You know, they could have their backyard back. They could plant whatever trees they wanted.
Well, no, not necessarily, because you'd have to keep the utility right-of-way clear. There'd be, even if it's buried, there'd be restrictions on what you put over it. We have problems in rear lot sewers where people forgot they're there, then they build garages, and there's a manhole in the garage, and we have odd discussions about accessing it.
But then you get into possibilities like putting them under the roads or putting them under the sidewalks. And yes, we'd lose a lot of trees if we did that, but then we could replace the trees and people could pick their trees and we could pick better trees. I mean, I think there's a lot of ways to squint at this that I don't pretend to all understand, but if anything is strategic, this is a long-term strategic goal that I think we need to pay attention to. And there's going to be a lot of getting ready to get ready, right? But we have to start, is my view.
Okay, anything else from Mr. House? Thank you very much. I think that concludes your presentation, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, I'd simply ask, no, we have another agenda item. We're at the end of this agenda item, okay? We understand. So I don't want to prolong this discussion. I don't ever want to prolong, anyway, I'll keep my mouth shut. Anyway, but I would ask that the council, between now and Saturday, communicate in some fashion with the city manager, because it occurs to me we're putting him in kind of a tough situation here. We're asking him to sort of, I guess, lead this discussion on Saturday, and I want to give full notice I'm not going to lead this discussion. And so I would just ask that you share with him your thoughts about how he can accomplish this discussion in a meaningful way on Saturday, so we can accomplish what we want to accomplish on Saturday. So I would just ask the council to consider and think about that.
Can I make a comment?
Sure, of course.
Thanks. I would suggest this also, that each of us, put our thoughts down on, paper, perhaps, to present on Saturday, especially in terms of things that we might have, thinking that are strategic priorities that we'd like to talk about that may not be on any of the director lists that we looked at tonight. So if there's something different. And for those things that are particularly on the director list that we feel pretty supportive of, make a note of those as well, because that will move the entire discussion along, I think, pretty rapidly.
Okay, agenda item 6.2, update on the city's efforts to comply with the state's lead and copper rule requirements. Mr. House, good to see you, sir, tonight.
And I will move fast with this, because this is a pretty, Ron Lacoste put together this outstanding presentation, which is very informative. So the purpose of this is to help explain where we are with the lead and copper rule, and more specifically, the distribution system material inventory. A lot of acronyms, a lot of mouthfuls here. And this is to help kind of inform you with going into budget and strategic priorities. Next slide, please. We see the agenda here. We'll go to the next slide. So lead and copper rule requirements. So basically, Eagle made us responsible for service lines if they are lead or they have galvanized components, where in the past we were not responsible for the private side from the water meter to the water valve. And with that, there's a requirement for us to do a material inventory. That timeline was supposed to be done by January 1st, 2025. They moved it up to October of this is wrong, to 24 because of no, that's correct, because of federal law. So what that means is we have to give our best efforts to identify this material in 3 points. And if we go to the next slide, we'll talk further. And we talked about in the past the division of ownership. You see that line, private property, and then city's responsibility. What our primary concern of lead in the system is the lead gooseneck. It's the flexible footing that would connect to a galvanized line, which connects to our main. Any questions on that? I'm going to keep moving. Okay. Next slide. To comply with the material inventory, we started off with people sending us photos. Well, Eagle said that doesn't work. Now we need 3 points. We need to in the house, and we need on the left and right side of the valve. So we had a lot of people sent us photos, and we had some great discussion at the Water Advisory Council at the Elmswell, and we're working hard on identifying this. But the way we do this, a couple months ago, you approved a hydrovac contract with Chartier, who has a giant vacuum, sucks out the earth next to the water valve. We get visual identification. The toughest thing we have is getting into the houses. But in the roadway, we have challenges too, as you'll see roots, you'll see driveways, and those are tougher, and we tend to bypass those. So next slide. So you see a map of all the work that's been done. We've a lot of all 3 locations have been identified at 892 locations out of the roughly 8,000 mains or service lines. We have excavated at 1,800 locations. Our primary concern is south of Saginaw. To get in the interior, we give people door flyers, we call them, but we're at a point now where we might need your help to help amplify that need to get access. Because the door flyers aren't working, people are blowing us off, and that would give us greater fidelity because frankly, we want to know if there's a lead service line here. And also, we're going to be talking about replacing meters, and we need to reestablish the precedent, the water department getting inside and taking a look at things, because it's going to be part of the process here. But we've been very flexible, people working weekends and evenings, but not a lot of great response. Going to the next slide. So replacement effort, we have a couple ways to replace. When this first came out, the direction from council was, let's do this in a quality manner. Let's just not dig up someone's yard and throw in a line, tear up their landscaping or walls. We're sensitive to each site. If there's a bunch of landscaping there, we're going to directionally drill. If it's a short yard and there's not a lot of landscaping, we'll open cut it. Our goal is to make sure that we don't disrupt the resident, but we provide a quality service. Our challenge, though, is each home is different on the inside. As you'll see there, there are additions. That water main might not go, once it gets into the house, it might go all over the place. Lots of challenges with finished basements, people doing unique plumbing. So there's the unknown of the underground, and there's the unknown we get in the house. But the team strives to do a great job to provide a quality product for the resident. Any questions on that?
I do have some questions. Yeah. So can you tell us of the universe of residential housing that has to be surveyed, what percentage of that universe has now been surveyed?
I don't have an exact figure on that. So there's 2 ways to do this. So Eagle had a statistical algorithm where you can test these locations, and that would be representative. But what we're running into is we're running into slugs of lead or galvanized in areas, and that's why we're increasing inspection efforts, just because we don't want to, just because that survey doesn't say to test there. If we're seeing a couple in a row, then we're going to assume that they'll be further on the street, and we just want to figure out what we don't know.
Okay, but you're talking about what I'll call the infrastructure out at the road or in the right-of-way, essentially, correct?
Correct.
So now, but this problem, you need to then follow it into the house. And you need to figure out what goes in the house.
So the blue dot, in-house only 570. All 3 points,
I'm sorry, slow down.
892.
Say that again?
So in the upper right,
The blue hatching?
the blue, there's a, on this slide, so the green box means all 3 have been confirmed, 892. The orange means 1,800 have been confirmed at the water
Well,
valve.
see, where's that figure? You're coming up with a numerical figure. I don't see that on the chart. Where is that? Of course, I can barely read this chart.
Yeah,
anyway.
that chart's not the most user-friendly.
Isn't there a slide, you've got a slide that says currently have 335 known lead
And
or
that's-
galvanized water service pipes?
And that gets to the, more of the output, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, but that doesn't give me, all right, so just before Saturday, can you get us some statistical?
Well, from this slide, so roughly 11% of the total have all 3 points. 23% have been excavated at the valve, and then 7% in-house only. But we'll provide better
You're not
data.
understanding my question.
Yes.
What I want to know is, you've now identified that you got a problem with the population in terms of completing this.
Yes.
So what I'd like to know is, of the total population, that's the universe.
Yep.
What is the percentage or the number of people that have yet to have things even surveyed?
Okay, got it.
Or another way of saying is, how many households have now had this process completed? Whether it involves replacing something, not replacing something, or whatever, but you know that house, we can mark off what's happened, what should have happened has now happened. That's all.
Okay, no, we can get that.
I need to know the extent of the problem.
Nope, good question.
And so to go back to where you started, so this, I'm gonna call it the inventory. The inventory to report to whomever it is that we need to report to has to be completed by that date in October of this year?
Yes.
Okay. And am I getting now from you that you're concerned about having that done by October because of what I will now refer to as the response rate?
We're not quite raising the red flag, but we're almost there, because we don't know how, where it'd be better to have more complete data. And we're not sure how Eagle will weigh in on this. And it would be better to fill in those gaps, but we're assessing that internally, and we will be coming back shortly with, if we need help, we'll ask for help.
Okay, so now I want to bring this down to the microcosm. So about 3 or 4 months ago, somebody came by our street in South Lawn, and of course, I never can figure any of this stuff out, but I'm out asking questions. So I think were doing this procedure, or was that involve gas lines?
So it could have been both, but if it was a hole adjacent.
Oh, yeah.
That was us.
Okay, big hole, tore up the yard, somebody had to go inside, check the lines inside.
Yes.
Nothing had to be replaced inside, but they had to replace something out in the right-of-way, down below, and then it involved a lead across the street to the another house, and so that's what was going on then.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, all right, thank you. Other questions?
I have a question. Is there a period of construction within the city that would not have, that you would sort of say, that's not going to, we don't need to look at those houses?
So we're doing some statistics just north of Saginaw to prove that, and based on as-built and other things, the goal is to show Eagle, hey, this is like Hawks Nest per se and other
Right.
areas. But there can be outliers. We just want to make sure we do our due diligence to comply with that.
All right, but is there a particular date of construction that you would expect that we wouldn't have this issue in a particular house?
Yeah, we're guessing, after the 60s, after the 50s. It's just, the challenge is maybe there was a house listed as constructed in the 60s, but maybe it was a house from the 40s that was remodeled. And the original line was in there, and it's adjacent to that area. Those are some of the one-offs.
So about the same time we set up the packet for Bircham Road?
Yeah.
About the same time?
Yes.
Yeah,
A
okay.
lot of things were happening then.
Kit, yeah, I'm sorry, Kit.
No. But if we go to the next slide,
We have
then the
another
next slide. So this gets to, we're not seeing anything major concerns as far as lead. We have great water. 90% of the areas are galvanized pipes. But I want to jump to the next slide. So our challenge is we're going to have roughly 335 known lead or galvanized pipes that we have not replaced. That might grow. We are funding this through the water rates. We are working with our as-needed contractor to do this, to provide this level of service, because each house is different. Other challenge, we found that we applied for a SRF loan through the drinking water. We were denied. So every time we pay for one of these service lines, it competes with a project. So this might be something to consider for general fund and just putting it there versus water meters, because this isn't something that's, ratepayers were expecting to take on, paying for someone's private infrastructure. The cost to replace is $4,000 to $8,000, and and that's using each site customized. That doesn't take into staff time. The planning factor from the state is $10,000 per service line. So on a 2.6 million roughly, probably higher. So as we were coming through this, to take this on to replace these, we want to open the idea to working with our as-needed contractor to extending a contract. And if council wants to go this way, to pursue this. Under the lead and copper rule, we have 20 years to replace these at 5% per year. But I don't like that because, it creates a disadvantage. So you have a house known with a lead or copper line, it's out there. And because this will be public, once we get all these inventories, that's just going to burn in people. The quicker we can get past this, the better. Because I think that just resets the playing field for everyone. We comply and we have a safe system. Because just because there's not an issue now, maybe something happens in the future. So it's
Okay.
just
Any
food
other
for thought.
questions?
So I think you said that we can't pay for replacing people's private lines with the sewer, with the water.
We can, we are right now. But what it's doing is it's directly competing with water projects. So if we pay roughly, say $3 million over the next 2 years, so that's taking out roughly 1.5 miles of water main replacement.
Can we just raise rates?
That'd be a tough one to raise it that high to get to there.
But can we raise them a little to sort of?
We could, and those could be, depending, I think the feedback we'd be looking for, would there be interest in leveraging general fund towards this? And if not, if 27s, we could give the cost of rate increases to how many water lines we could replace, or funding scenarios. It's a 2-year scenario or a 3-year scenario, 4-year scenario.
Well, I can give you some feedback right now. I think that if we can find a way to pay for water infrastructure through water rates, we should do it. And we should not be subsidizing enterprise funds with the general fund. That's just my general view, because we're not wealthy enough as a city to be able to do that. That's just me. So I think continuing to fund those line replacements out of the water fund makes sense to me. as a resident, I'm confused about what my status is. I think I looked at one of your maps, and I think we're an orange household, I'm embarrassed to say, which means you've hydrovac'd us, but we haven't had you inside yet.
And that's the challenge where the standards changed about what was needed for
Yep.
inside. And we're going to address that and release what houses are good to go.
Okay,
and to
great.
better inform people.
Yeah, so it would be nice for me to be able to just look up, click on the GIS map and say, okay, yeah, I got to give them a call, and then it tells me what the number is. And so that, because I sent in the photographs.
Yes,
right-
you were
right at
one of the first
beginning.
ones. Yes.
Well, good to know. But now I just can't remember whether, we've ticked off all the boxes.
And that's the rules have been changing on
Yeah.
us. This has been a moving target.
Yeah, and so I'm probably not the only one that's confused on that front, and so having a way so that people can catch up easily and figure out what their status is.
Agreed.
I have just a general question.
Go ahead, Mark.
Because it seems to me if we're talking about the cost, the expense of this, I wouldn't like to see water rates go up. So I'm sort of a little different on that, but why wouldn't this qualify for the income tax infrastructure money that we're collecting specifically for these purposes?
And that could, because we could shift money from primarily we've been dumping into or contributing to roads and other infrastructure that could help offset that as well.
Okay.
Anything else?
I just want to clarify, I just want to hear it again, maybe lead and copper rule of 2019, and
Yes.
then the feds just made moved up the date.
Yeah,
right?
it's been modified several times because I think the state was before the feds, then the feds came, then the state reacted, then the feds made things more aggressive.
And then your recommendation is to take care of it all at once because of concerns from the public, which
Yeah.
is duly noted.
I think it would make the city more competitive.
And why, it's 2024 now, and I know, I believe you're on leave for military service, but I'm just curious, why, have we been planning at all?
We've been grinding away at these. We've been doing surveys. We've been replacing as we've gone. We've done.
I guess more from a financial standpoint than the actual, work.
So we've been looking at this, and it was only, and we got better clarity of what we were facing. That's what we were looking at. Let's just knock this out. Let's get this off the table and get this behind us. Because only recently, through the enhanced excavation survey activities, did we really understand the scope of the problem. And we've been attacking these piecemeal as we go as well. Because inevitably, when you hydrovac someone's old line and it's galvanized, it's going to break, and other challenges. So we've been replacing a lot as we go.
Any other questions? Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you.
Thanks to staff and council for going through the process tonight. Very much appreciated. Always hate to have staff sit here for a long time, but thank you very much. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Moved by Singh, seconded by Watson. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you, everybody.